story begins in a flashback. A dragon looks down at a girl and asks why she is so obsessed with becoming stronger. She looks around, fully focused, and says that it is to meet her master again and finally walk beside him. The dragon relaxes and asks if the master she talks about is really stronger than her, which makes. She almost shouts it's so obvious. She tells the dragon that she has barely started learning the basics from him. The dragon, confused, asks, "What kind of creature is this master? He is definitely not human." But she immediately interrupts him and firmly says, "He is definitely human." Then she adds a crazy detail. She says that his father is God, who created the world, and his mother is a spirit of nature. She imagines his silhouette standing among volcanoes and begins to say his name, but at that very moment. But then the scene breaks off. A heavy boot steps on the ground, and there stands a boy with dark hair, and suddenly someone recognizes him as the sword master of St. Alice. The girl raises her eyes to him with full reverence and says that he must be the great saint of the sword Takumi. Takumi looks at her completely embarrassed and only makes a puzzled sound, but that's not the point. But he awkwardly scratched his cheek and told her that she was definitely mistaken. He was not that person. He stubbornly insists that he is not some great sword saint or some impressive figure, so he says that he is just an ordinary old man who retired long ago and lives alone in the mountains. The girl laughed and said that he was joking. His humor was simply top-notch. Here, Takumi notices that she is not listening and simply asks who she really is, and this makes her pee. She apologized for taking so long to introduce herself as the chief disciple of Lord St. Alice. When Takumi hears this name, he laughs, saying it kind of takes him back to the good old days, and finally she raises her eyes, smiles broadly, and truly introduces herself, Leia. Takumi laughs. What an incredible thing. The girl he saved right before retiring is now a sword saint. But then suddenly realization hits him. He shouts in complete shock, "Sword saint." And he panics, asking if she means the very same wild brat whom he had to teach to use chopsticks 10 years ago. Leia simply nods, telling him that is exactly why he is the strongest person and the teacher of the Master Alice. Takumi calms down a little, mumbling to himself that Alice has probably really become strong. But he freezes, realizing, if she is only second, then someone must definitely be above her. He thinks that the old rankings have hardly changed, and asks if the great sage Nuru Hatchi is still first. Leia immediately shook her head and told him that Nuru Hatchi has actually fallen to third place. She keeps smiling and begins to announce who exactly now holds first place. She announces Takumi as the strongest in the universe with a crushing advantage, and he looks completely dead inside. Takumi's soul seems to have torn from his body and floated into the boundless cosmos. The shock was too strong. He falls to his hands and knees in the dirt, shouting that this is very strange. He retired 10 years ago. He explains that back then, thanks to his team, he was only around 500th place, and since then he has done nothing so. He begins to stutter, awkwardly trying to remind her of his tragic past, where his former party directly told him to his face that he was fired, essentially calling him useless. He shouts that after he was kicked out, he completely gave up adventures and just went to live alone in the mountains. Leia just smiles and, waving him off, tells him that he is too modest. She knows about all his great deeds. She begins to list the crazy exploits, conquered the great dungeon, and killed the ancient dragon to save the capital. She claims that his work is considered the greatest in all of human history, past, present, and future. But Takumi looks at her in horror and shouts that he doesn't remember doing any of that at all. Takumi breaks out in sweat and shouts that his only memories are hunting small animals and growing vegetables in the mountains. Leia doesn't listen at all. She just smiles and says it's strange how he doesn't boast about his work, calling him a truly wonderful person. Takumi turns away, completely exhausted, and wonders if she understands a single word of what he is saying. He tries to clarify everything by asking her, do people seriously believe that he did all those crazy things by himself? She interrupts him. The Adventurers Guild records actually show that at that time he formed a party only with Lady Alice. But she adds that Alice personally told her. In fact, Takumi did everything himself like a true beast. Takumi began to think to himself, this girl Alice really became a sword saint and just completely smashed all those legendary quests, and now she tells everyone that he carried all the hard work on his own. He pondered for a long time what that means until he comes up with some brilliant idea. She is probably just trying to repay him for taking care of her when she was little. When the secret in his head is finally solved, he decides that he will just come down the mountain later and tell the guild the real truth. Takumi looks up at the huge building in front of him and thinks to himself that being number one in the ranking is too heavy a burden, so he turns to the girl and asks what she really came here to do. Leia holds her breath a little, surprised by the sudden question, and she explains with a bitter smile. Lady Alice is undoubtedly the strongest person in the world, but unfortunately, she is very bad at teaching others. So that is exactly why she rushed here to ask for training from the great sword Saint Takumi, the strongest in the universe. Takumi closes his eyes and, trying not to offend her, quietly tells Leia that Alice was not his student in the way she imagines. He smiles gently, waving his hand, and sincerely says that he has no intention of taking students right now. He turns and walks away, saying that he is actually too weak to teach anyone, so she better forget this idea and go home. Suddenly Takumi freezes and starts sweating profusely. He looks down and sees Leia silently pulling out a small knife as if it were completely normal. She looks him straight in the eyes and calmly says that she came here fully prepared to commit ritual suicide if he refuses to make her his student. The pressure she radiated was incredible, and she asks Takumi, "Please, think very carefully about this situation and give her a serious answer." Takumi understands that he is in deep trouble because this girl clearly does not intend to listen to a single word he says, so he immediately gives up and says to her, "All right," promising to acknowledge her as his student, and Leia asks distrustfully if he is really serious. She bursts into tears of joy and loudly shouts a big thank you to her new great master. Then she gets overly excited and throws herself at him, hugging him so tightly that she almost crushed him right there. The scene shifts outside the cave. Leia is in panic, screaming and begging, asking what happened to her master. Takumi wakes up in bed and shouts that he is alive. Leia apologizes, assuming that he fainted from exhaustion after a month of continuous fighting with an ancient dragon. Takumi looks her straight in the eyes and firmly forbids her to touch him again because he knows, next time he will really die. But Leia completely misunderstood this. She thinks that his power is so immense that touching him would be dangerous for her. She is convinced that he deliberately forced his body to shut down early to protect her from his uncontrollable energy. She hits her head on the floor in a deep bow and apologizes for making him go through all that trouble. Takumi freezes, looking at her, and realizes literally everything she just thought is completely wrong, but he thinks that correcting her right now is too much trouble, so he just lets it go. Moreover, he is completely sure, if she hugs him one more time, his body simply won't endure and he will die. So he comes up with a plan just to do it anyhow. He will give her a fake full master license and send her home. He put on a mask of confidence and picked up the game, assuring her that she perfectly understood the situation. Continuing, the narrator notices that this very line will be the one he will say more often than all others throughout his entire life. He does not know it yet, but he will deeply regret not resolving this misunderstanding right now. Leia lowers her gaze and admits that she actually has no control over her power at all. She attacks at full force every time because she simply does not know how to restrain herself. She remembered that Alice called him the strongest, so she was stunned that his aura was weak, like a goblin's, and she guessed that he was hiding his true power. Leia falls to the floor in a bow and admits that she did not notice his true strength at all. She is sincerely impressed. He can hide it even better than the best adventurers, and Takumi stands and listens to her praise. He understands that although he knew this, hearing that to her he looks so weak and pathetic really hurts. Leia does not back down from her theory, smiling. Probably, he gained this insane control over the aura after truly bloody training. She begs him, "Teach me, please, how it is done." Takumi, turning his back, sweats nervously because he has absolutely no idea what she is talking about. But he needs to buy time, so he says that it is already late and the real training will start only tomorrow, and for now, he just asks her to help and peel a few potatoes. Leia catches a potato and instantly stands at attention, looking at the vegetable as if it were a critically important mission item. And she draws her huge sword to peel it, realizing that this is one of those famous tricks pretending to cook, but actually secret training. She exclaims that she expected nothing less from Master Takumi. Takumi just stands with his back turned, probably wondering why she is so fiery, but he turns around with a quiet smile and tells her that she understood everything perfectly, although deep down he knows he is just making something up on the spot. Takumi usually starts peeling his potato, and the narrator smiles and says that, strangely enough, this mundane task will later become a legendary training method. Takumi suggests making rabbit stew for dinner and asks if she has any food allergies, but she says she is fine with everything. So Leia looks at the hanging meat and asks in surprise why there are only small animals, like rabbits, and why he does not hunt big ones, say bears. Takumi sweats and, to change the subject, nervously asks her if they could really eat a whole giant monster if he caught one. He thinks to himself that he can never admit that fighting a bear is completely beyond his strength. But Leia did not read it that way at all. She looks impressed and says that he must have a deep philosophy not to kill needlessly and to respect life. She adds that Alice told her everything in particular, that Takumi's father is a god who created the entire universe, and that his mother is a great spirit who protects nature. She is completely convinced that his parents are true deities. Takumi just stands and thinks that this is nonsense. His father is an ordinary tavern owner, and his mother is the hostess. He is embarrassed and wonders what Alice is trying to do to him with these crazy lies, but just then. And then something crashes into the roof right between them. It seems the cooking is over. Leia panics completely when the roof collapses and shouts Takumi's name, but she only looked at him and was instantly captivated, saying that this was exactly what she expected from him. She notices that the enemy is standing very close, and Takumi still hasn't moved an inch. She is impressed. He stands his ground, does not retreat, even though all this deadly intent is directed right at them. She thinks that his calm is quite natural, but the real reason why he froze is simply because he was so scared that he slightly wet his pants on the spot. Leia draws her sword, points it at the winged girl, and sharply demands to know who she is, emphasizing that she is definitely not human. The uninvited guest smiled crookedly and said, "It's obvious," then asked if she really looked like she belonged to some lower species. She looks them in the eyes defiantly and introduces herself. "I am Chloe, daughter of the Black Dragon King." And she explains that she came here specifically to meet the person who supposedly defeated the ancient dragon. Chloe stepped right up to his face, and he, sweating, asks in a trembling voice if he is the one called Takumi. She introduced herself as Chloe, daughter of the Black Dragon King, and immediately asked sharply if he was really the one. Leia instantly intervenes and sharply says that it is obviously not her. She points to the man sitting right there, Master Takumi. Chloe assessed the trembling bundle on the floor with one glance and asked, "Is that really him?" completely unimpressed. Takumi just sits facing the wall, hurt by her disappointed tone, but he is too scared to even argue. Leia yells at her for rudeness, loudly explaining that Takumi is deliberately holding back his overwhelming power right now. She warns the dragon girl, if he really gets serious, she will be wiped out in less than a second. But in reality, Takumi trembles like a leaf and thinks he is already using all his strength just to avoid fainting. Outside, Chloe fully believes this lie and gets excited, shouting that she wants to see this hidden power right now. Yes, Takumi panics, comes up with a pathetic excuse, and begs to wait a little longer. His dinner in the hot pot is almost ready. Chloe watches him from behind, completely confused. She wonders how he can just focus on skimming the foam off the pot of soup amidst all this bloody chaos. So Leia responds for him with a confident smile and tells the dragon girl that Master Takumi doesn't even consider her power worthy of concern. Takumi stands with a ladle and smiles like a pro, but in his mind he has completely lost faith in life and only wants all this to end soon. He is all sweaty and thinks only about calmly finishing his last dinner, but aloud, as if nothing happened, he indifferently asks her, "So how is it?" He extends the bowl of stew and gently suggests that they eat a little first and calm down even for a moment. He smiles like a true saint, extending the bowl, but he only smiles like that because he has already accepted. Today is the day he will die. Suddenly, from the very entrance of the cave came a huge scream. Someone shouted how delicious the food was, and Chloe is sitting there, cheeks stuffed full, blushing and shouting that she has never tasted anything more delicious in her life. Takumi asks if she wants seconds. There is plenty of food. He pretends to be generous because he considers himself doomed, and Chloe immediately exclaims that she will eat more. He turns and asks Leia if she wants another portion, but she politely declines, saying she will cook for herself so as not to burden his hands with such a task. Takumi serves Lyra a bowl of food, saying that serving food is the teacher's duty. She happily thanks him, and he remains calm only because he considers himself doomed. Leia took one bite, and she loses her mind. She shouts that she can't believe such an incredible hot pot really exists in this world. She, with her mouth full, begins to fervently insist that he is not just strong, but a culinary genius, and calls him the terribly omnipotent Superman. Takumi laughed, waved it off, and said that she was exaggerating, like shut up and eat, but in his heart he thought it didn't matter, he would die soon anyway. Leia immediately apologizes for talking too much and dives back into her food, but suddenly Chloe looks at him seriously and asks Takumi if she can ask him just one question. Takumi gives her a completely relaxed smile and says he doesn't care at all because he still follows simple logic. The dead have nothing to worry about. She looks him straight in the eyes and asks the big question. If he is obviously so strong, why does he walk around pretending to be weak? She says that from birth she believed strength is something to boast about, but when she saw her grandfather lose to him, all her faith wavered. She says that her grandfather is an ancient dragon, a legend among dragons, who had not been defeated for thousands of years until he lost now. Chloe says that since Takumi beat him, her grandfather trembles with fear of people and has completely shut himself off. Takumi immediately understands that behind this mess is Alice and wonders what the hell has she done to the poor dragon. Chloe does not calm down. She simply does not understand why he hides his strength if he is so mighty. She begins to list his flaws: a weak body, a foolish face, and an aura as tiny as a goblin's. She throws at him that he is weaker than any adventure she has ever faced, but Leia suddenly interrupts her and scolds her for pointing with sticks. Takumi tries to smile through tears. He was mocked so harshly right to his face that it really hurts. Leia enters with a self-satisfied look and asks the Black Lizard if she really doesn't understand what is going on here. Chloe sharply cut off the nickname, deeply offended. Takumi is still crying somewhere behind, and Leia simply ignores them. And explains that back then, when she accidentally hugged Takumi, she understood the truth about him. She says that at that moment she realized, if Takumi ever released all the restrained power inside him, the whole world would be destroyed. Leia trembles, looks at him in fear of that enormous power that she supposedly manages to feel, and Takumi panics inside and does not understand. What power is she even talking about? She rushes into a story about her past to prove her point, claiming that since childhood she mastered every secret technique of her clan. She tells them that through those relentless trainings, she mastered the way to endure literally any physical pain. But then she starts blushing wildly and admits that since the time she touched Takumi, her heart hasn't stopped pounding, and she gets hot just from the memory. She says that just a tiny touch released so much energy that it almost destroyed her body. She actually confused the powerful grip with a death ray. Chloe ironically calls it a terrible power, and Takumi just sits and tells her that it sounds much more like a serious illness. But Leia ignores him and indignantly lectures the dragon. She says that Takumi restrains himself only because they are weak, and his crying is actually tears of pity for them. In Takumi's head, it screams that she is completely wrong, but he understands. If he doesn't give them a good answer now, it's the end for him. He instantly changes his mood, puts on a smug smile, and tells Leia that she has figured it out perfectly, pretending as if it was planned from the very beginning. He manages to pretend, but inside he sobs and thinks about what a ridiculous guy he has to be just to survive. Takumi sweats profusely and cries bitterly, wondering if his grandfather felt as miserable when fighting dragons. Chloe looks him in the eyes but begins to tremble, admitting to herself that she cannot find any way to truly defeat him, so she bursts into the air, shouting that she definitely has not won this fight yet. Then a wild rumor spread everywhere that he had defeated the black dragon without even touching it. But before leaving, Chloe turns around, points directly at him with her finger, and shouts that she will definitely return for a rematch. She disappeared into the sky, and Takumi just watches her go, praying that she never appears again. Later, inside, Leia pushed him out of the kitchen and decisively said that she would clean everything herself so he could go rest. Outside it is pitch dark, so Takumi gently but firmly tells her to return home. Mountain roads are dangerous at night. They just look at each other, completely confused. He asks if she is not leaving, and she looks shocked she can't believe he even asked. She blushes and whispers to him that Alice taught her. A student must live next to the master constantly until the training is complete. Leia, completely serious, tells him shocking news. She is going to live right here together with him. But Takumi instantly panics. He shouts no, 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 insisting that he would never do anything like that with a girl her age. He tries to firmly put an end to it, telling her simply to go home for today and come back tomorrow. Suddenly, he remembers that she previously mentioned palpitations, so he offers to take her home and stop by a clinic to have her examined. Leia immediately turns her head away, pouting, and tells him she hates that idea and firmly refuses to go. Then she insists that his strength causes strange, mysterious changes in her body that she has never felt in her life. Takumi stands with a stone face, thinking to himself that he definitely has nothing to do with what she feels, but Leia blushes deeply and says that this tightening pain in her chest seems to raise power within her. She feels that she is about to become stronger. Takumi just imagines a real mushroom cloud and, horrified, thinks that the power growing means she is about to self-detonate. So he tries again to convince her, wagging his finger and saying he cannot allow an unmarried girl to live with someone as old as him. Takumi nervously looks at her and says to stop, put down that dagger, and immediately stop trying to cut your own belly. Leia holds the sword at the ready and confidently says she has given her whole life to him, so nonsense like gender differences is not important to her at all. Takumi understands that this is too much trouble, so he gives in and tells her, "All right, you can live here, just stop trying to commit ritual suicide." Leia's face instantly lit up, and she thanks him with a big smile. She almost rushed to him and suddenly froze, apologized, because she was so happy that she almost broke the rule of not touching him. Takumi outwardly remains calm and simply tells her to be more careful next time. And he watches as she happily bounces away, nervously asking her not to break his house while she settles in. Leia stands, cheeks burning, whispering that Takumi is really scary. His power flowed into her again, even though they didn't even touch. She grabs her chest, looks completely confused, and says her heart is beating so fast, as if from that energy it is about to burst out. Takumi tries to sound like a wise master, giving a lecture. If she cannot even control that tiny spark of power, she has no future as a warrior. She breaks down into hysteria again, wildly apologizing for messing everything up, as if it were the end of the world. But Takumi is already completely tired of this drama, so he sits down and decides, let's just rest tonight. He points across the room, clearly showing her which side is her territory and which is his. Leia is noticeably upset about the distance and asks if she can just sleep next to him. She suddenly gasps and covers her mouth with her hand, as if she just realized something incredibly big, and she says that if she slept next to him, she wouldn't be able to withstand his strength and would simply break. She smiles triumphantly, as if she just solved a mystery, and asks him if this is the real reason why he separated them like that. Takumi does not change his facial expression and tells her that she figured it out perfectly, thereby confirming that she is completely right. He lies down and thinks that actually he is the one who will break the most because he is too nervous. He admits to himself that he won't be able to sleep next to a girl because he has no experience with women at all. Leia lies in the dark, unable to fall asleep, whispering that just living together in one house is already very stressful, and her face turns completely red as she admits to herself that this situation is completely beyond her strength. Morning comes, Takumi wakes up with a huge yawn, and Leia is already awake and immediately greets him. The path, Takumi looks around and sees her sitting by the entrance with a knife, and nervously asks what is going on. She points to a huge bucket of peeled potatoes and explains that she was too excited to sleep, so she started training at dawn. Takumi simply loses his head, realizing that if she keeps peeling food like this, they will starve before the end of winter. He immediately established a new rule to save supplies and strictly ordered her to peel only one potato a day. Leia looks overwhelmed and asks how this can even be called training, but suddenly freezes mid-sentence as if she just had an epiphany. She turns around with a huge smile, confident that by training, he meant learning how to decide what to do with free time. Takumi sweats but pretends everything is under control and shamelessly lies to her face that she perfectly understood his plan. Takumi stood looking at the bucket of potato peels, full of regret and grumbling about what a waste it was. He decides, later I will crush them and cook potato soup. We see a hand gripping a sword, but Takumi pays no attention. He crawls on the floor picking up crumbs, grumbling that now he cannot afford to throw away food because expenses have increased. Suddenly Leia shouts, "You scoundrel, what do you think you're doing?" Her voice is full of rage and she thrusts the sword forward with furious speed, the blade passing right by Takumi's face before he could blink. Takumi freezes, convinced that she has finally grown tired of the poor stingy master who picks up leftover potatoes. And he begins to sweat heavily, thinking that living with her, he seems to have a premonition of death hundreds of times a day. But then a polite voice from the side says indifferently, "Good morning, Takumi Dono," and Takumi looks around embarrassed. It turned out that Leia aimed a weapon at the uninvited guest. She barked at that guy for daring to return immediately after Takumi spared him. She decides that enough talking is enough, so she shouts at Takumi, "It's time to just finish off this guy once and for all." Takumi panics and asks Leia to calm down. The sword is literally a few centimeters from his nose and scares him to death, but he manages to say that it seems this uninvited guest did not come here to fight. Chloe immediately agrees, politely addresses him as Takumi Dono, and explains that she came all the way here just to report to him, so she suddenly falls to one knee and fires a stunning piece of news in his face. The entire dragon tribe has officially decided to become loyal subjects of Takumi. Takumi stands all sweaty and confused, and Chloe continues, announcing that from now on they want him to lead them all as the new Dragon King. Leia watches all this unfold, and a picture gradually forms in her head. She realizes that her master has already raised the strongest student in the world, and he has just taken an even stronger great student as his apprentice. But it seems that even this was not enough for him because now he, among other things, literally becomes the king of the dragon tribe. Her delusions that he is a god just go off the charts. Meanwhile, Takumi seems to feel his soul leaving his body. He realizes that his dream of a quiet, boring life is loudly falling apart right before him. And so, with a reluctant leader and a power that everyone misunderstood, the true legend finally begins, but elsewhere. A mysterious figure in armor lurked in the shadows and quietly whispered the name Takumi, a sign that his troubles were far from over. The scene shifts us to the past. A knight in heavy armor looms over Takumi and with a dull thud drops a hammer, saying that from today he is officially expelled from the party. Today, Takumi's face turned pale and was covered in sweat as this news struck him, and he barely managed to whisper a confused, "Why is this happening?" Because he honestly did not think it would end like this, and his face simply froze in shock. But deep down, he admits to himself, he always knew the truth all this time, he was just a burden to the other members. And he truly considers it a miracle that they even allowed someone as talentless as him to stay in the party for so long. We quickly glanced at the squad he leaves behind, Rick a warrior standing upright, and next to him Batsu, a thief. And here Sasha, the priestess, is noticeably worried about the situation, but the real heavyweight of the group. That mysterious woman standing with her back turned radiates such a powerful aura that it is immediately clear to everyone she is the leader here. Takumi accepts his fate without a fight and tells them he understands. Tonight he will pack his things and leave. But the girl shouts in his face without any restraint, firmly says no, and orders him to get out of here right now. Takumi tries one last time to be kind, asks if he can at least prepare a farewell lunch for everyone before leaving. But Sasha completely breaks character, starts drooling, and says that it actually sounds really good, so. The girl in armor instantly put an end to it and shouted in his face, "Get out of here right now." Takumi does not resist, he simply thanks them for everything they have done for him so far. And he walks into the darkness, glancing back once more to ask them, "Please take care of Alice." As he leaves, we see a brief memory. A hand gently strokes the girl's head, a small act of kindness. But suddenly Rick shouted for him to stop and ordered Takumi to leave the collar. It belongs to that old scoundrel. Takumi says he understands. He raises his hand to his neck and immediately begins to unfasten the clasp, but as soon as he touched the crazy light, it exploded with light, and Rick instantly realized. The old hag was eavesdropping. It's a teleportation trap. Magic rages around them. Rick panics, he shouts that she is really coming back right now. The team instantly rushed into battle against the approaching threat. Rick kicked powerfully and sent Takumi flying, and someone shouts that they will buy time. Rick is still playing the role, shouting at Takumi, asking what he is doing, and demanding that he get out of there faster. Sasha also connects, shouting that he needs to leave right now because he is simply not made to be an adventurer. Shilak Takumi is thrown into the air by the blow, but as he flies away, he begins to think, what the hell just happened? He realized that everything from the very beginning was wrong. Their harsh words sounded completely robotic, as if they were just reading bad lines. Finally, something clicks for him. They were putting on a show, and he is trying to figure out what they really wanted to do. The realization hits him as he looks back at his friends' memories of their cruel words take on a completely different, painful meaning. He remembered how Rick told the old witch that he himself had driven Takumi away and simply begged her to let the boy go. Then he recalls how Sasha begged her, explaining that Takumi was already at the limit of his strength and her healing would not save him. And finally Batsu, who called him the weakest in history, said it only to convince the ancient witch that Takumi was not worthy of a place in their elite team. The witch bursts in, her eyes burning with rage. She sternly says she will not allow it and resolutely proclaims, Takumi belongs to Nuru Hatchi and will live with them forever. She warns the adventurers not to stand in the way. 3 of them are not strong enough to defeat Nuru Hatchi, and Takumi just stands and watches, his eyes full of tears. He simply loses his mind when he realizes that his friends are truly risking their lives to protect him from this monster. Flying back in the air, he recalls their harsh words that the party would go on without him, but now he knows. Even when they called him a dead weight, they only wanted to save him, but he hits the ground hard. He breaks sharply and grits his teeth, convincing himself that this whole vile performance is definitely a setup so he can escape. The witch mockingly threw at the team, "You measure strength only by appearance, so what do you really know about the true Takumi?" She asks if they have ever stopped to think why Alice, with her crazy power, wanted to spend time with Takumi at all. Then the shot switches to Rick, who whispers to Takumi, "Run while we buy time," and Sasha quietly adds that his food was always delicious. And they SSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS When the witch noticed he was gone, her face immediately became puzzled, and she asked, "Where exactly did Takumi go?" Rick points into the distance and lies that Takumi ran away because Nuru Hatchi was bullying him, and Sasha picks up it's all that monster's fault. We need to get rid of that old woman. Panic grips her from that extended gesture, and she, stammering, begs them to wait, trying to say something about Alice. But she begins to lose her footing, convincing herself that Nuru Hatchi is not a villain, and desperately tries to hold back tears. It doesn't work at all. She just broke down right there and started crying like a giant baby. Takumi didn't waste a second, shouted "thank you" to his friends and ran off, saving his own life. The witch snapped her fingers and lunged forward with a mad gleam in her eyes, shouting his name. And she swears that no matter where he tries to hide, she will definitely find him, no matter what happens. The story jumps to the present, showing a quiet mountain landscape where Takumi is back in his usual routine, sitting by the fire cooking food, while Chloe and Leia wait for him to finish. Chloe begins to tell about the hierarchy of dragons. Each race has its own king, but her grandfather, an ancient dragon, once ruled over all from above. She explains that her grandfather actually retired after a fight with Takumi, so at that time matters passed to her father, and Takumi just casually scrambles eggs in the background. Chloe keeps repeating that her father knew. Takumi defeated grandfather with overwhelming power, so he made a crazy decision regarding Takumi. And he really started telling everyone that he wants to directly pass the title of Dragon King to him. Leia is not listening to that history lesson at all. She is just enthusiastically praising Takumi for his timing with the salt and eggs, as if it were a miracle. She is already almost drooling and tells him that she can no longer hold back because she needs to eat right now, but Takumi, with an extremely serious face, coldly cuts her off, saying that it is not ready yet and she will have to wait a little longer. He insists that she wait until the egg is perfectly soft and treats this soup as if life depends on it. Chloe ignores the conversation about cooking and admits that she was firmly against their father giving the throne to some stranger she had never met, so she decided to come herself and find Takumi to check if he was really worthy funny, because he is just worried about eggs right now. Chloe irritably asks if anyone is even listening to her story. She stands nearby while Takumi cooks, and Leia giggles and admits she is not listening at all, calls her a black lizard, and says now is not the time, so Chloe shouts that she came to report to him, and when Takumi says he heard, she screeches that he is not listening to her. They listen. Takumi quickly interrupts the drama, says the food is finally ready, and orders them to be quiet so they can have breakfast. Leia does not wait for permission, immediately takes a bite and chews with a happy sound. Her eyes sparkle, she blushes, and stammering, tells Takumi that the soup is simply incredibly tasty. And she is completely lost in the taste, says the egg melts in her mouth, it's just soup, but she is losing her mind. Chloe ignores the food and becomes serious again, explaining that for dragons following the strong is a rule. She says that even though he could have crushed her grandfather then, he did not boast about it at all. She sums up, seeing how Takumi lives so modestly that showed her the future of the dragon clan. Chloe suddenly drops to her knees and pleadingly asks him to take on the role to become the king of the dragon tribe and lead them. Takumi looks completely dead inside. He thinks this is more of a nightmare than an honor. He is all sweaty and panicking inside, repeating that this is impossible and that he hates it, trying to figure out how to say no without dying. Leia intervenes with a self-satisfied look and tells the black lizard to calm down for a moment. She will handle it. She smiles and says that Takumi actually never directly said he wouldn't become king, he just stays silent about it. Chloe's face lights up. She asks if this is really true, while Takumi panics in the background, shouting, "No, no, no," again and again. Leia ignores him and tells Chloe not to rush. She says he is just hinting that the time has not yet come, and Takumi remains completely confused. Chloe becomes too tense and persistently asks what she means by that time and when exactly it is supposed to happen, so Leia immediately answers the answer is obvious, and in her voice you can clearly hear that she planned all this in advance. She loudly says that it will happen when they conquer all the species in the world and build the final throne for him, and Takumi just stands nearby nervously laughing. Leia does not calm down, constantly speaking for him, claiming that Takumi will not be satisfied with something as insignificant as king of the dragon tribe. And she turns to him with a huge innocent smile and asks him to support her words. Treatment. Takumi explodes, shouting that she does not understand at all what he is really thinking. Chloe, confused by the sudden outburst of emotions, asks through the door if this means her assumption was wrong. Takumi put the dots over the I. He declared that he will not move from this place, and being a perfect king does not interest him at all. He smiles and tells Chloe that he is sorry, but he will not do it because he already gets everything he wants right here. He explains that the mountain already gives him everything a person really needs to survive. He pushes a bowl to her and asks her to try eating, saying that life is just sun, earth, and food. Chloe takes one bite and completely melts, making a strange sound because the taste is simply off the charts, and she feels warmth enveloping her body, and Leia with a self-satisfied smile asks if the Black Lizard finally understood this. Chloe finally gives in and admits the title King of the Dragon Tribe is really just an extra burden for him. She clearly says they have already decided he is their master, so they will not pressure him to truly lead them. But she begs him at least to keep in the back of his mind that the Dragon Tribe is now under his command. Takumi sighs and tells her he will think about it. Now he is stuck with a whole army piled right on the apprentice. And then he began to shed funny tears, wondering why his quiet life had turned into such a disaster. But suddenly he comes to his senses and asks how Leia and Chloe even found his house, because he freezes and suddenly realizes that he hasn't told a single living soul where he was really hiding. Leia cheerfully explains that Alice can definitely see what he is doing just by closing her eyes and thinking about him. And Takumi completely loses it, a stalker who magically sees him from afar. It's just horrible. For a second he tries not to look at that horror and turns back to Chloe. How did you even find this place? Chloe tells him that she just popped into the Adventurers Guild and asked where Ranker number 1 hangs out and Takumi instantly starts sweating, asking if the guild really just gave away his location so easily. She says no, they refuse to tell her anything, even if they knew, and they even act arrogantly. Takumi touches his chest and sighs deeply with relief, just glad that the system finally worked at least once, but Chloe says that pure coincidence at the same moment, there was another person in the guild who was looking for him. She says that this other person happened to be carrying one of his personal belongings, and she lifts a small bell and says that she took it from them and just followed its scent to find him. Takumi sees the bell and his soul seems to leave his body. He knows exactly who it belongs to. He started shouting at Chloe, "Take that thing and come back home immediately." He yells at her, "Throw that bell far away before it's too late." Chloe is completely confused by his panic and asks why he suddenly behaves so strangely. But the bell immediately exploded with a powerful flash of magic, causing Takumi to fall to the floor and cover his head. A voice burst from the light, calling Takumi. It sounded quite serious and this person says, waiting the last 10 years was much longer than living for 1,000 years. Leia closed her eyes from the dazzling light. Completely stunned, she realized she definitely knows who just appeared. This is the former first ranker, an elven mage with an immortal body, who just emerged from the light and the text presents her as the great wise Nuru Hatchi, and now she looks quite frightening. She recognizes Leia as Alice's apprentice and Chloe as the dragon's granddaughter, while Takumi cowardly hides behind them. Nuru Hatchi looks at the girls and asks Takumi if these are the same friends he is hanging out with now. So Leia immediately becomes serious, pierces her with a gaze, and asks for what exact purpose she came here. Nuru Hatchi smiles and tells him what she already said, she will never leave Takumi again. Leia turns around, completely puzzled, and asks her, "What exactly do you mean by that?" The great sage just smirked and declared it means exactly what it sounds like. She says it very clearly. It means she will always and everywhere be by Takumi's side. Leia has completely lost her mind, stammering about privacy in the bathroom and shouting where she is going to sleep. But Nuru Hatchi just hugs herself, blushing, and says that, of course, they will do all of that together. This is the last straw for Leia. She instantly draws her sword and asks Takumi if she can just cut down this great sage right now. Nuru Hatchi didn't even flinch. She was eerily calm when she said that the idea of trying to take her down sounds interesting. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Chloe bursts in and says that it will be very cramped for 4 in this tiny cave. Takumi and Leia sharply turned and shouted at the dragon girl, "What are you even talking about?" Chloe turns to Leia and asks if she plans to stay here forever, then casually drops a bomb. Takumi will become the Dragon King. She forms a small heart with her hands and adds that for this, she and Takumi need to get married immediately. So Nuru Hatchi just laughed, telling them she doesn't care how many wives get involved in this mess. Chloe beams with joy. Finally, someone understood everything. She had heard about the great sage from her grandfather and is ready to unite. Takumi almost loses his mind inside. This sudden emergence of a harem pressures him incredibly. It's too much for such an innocent boy. Leia decides the conversation is over. She draws her blade and is about to kill everyone, which pushes Takumi into a panic. He rushes to stop her. Suddenly, everything gets serious. Takumi calls Nuru Hatchi, and she turns, giving him her full attention. He puts on a stone-faced expression and tells her directly that she needs to leave. He cannot allow her to stay with him because he says that although he has no master, she was the one who once taught him the first steps in the world of adventure. Takumi smiles and tells her that despite their past, all he wants now is to live a quiet, peaceful life in these mountains. Takumi felt quite confident since he and Nuru Hatchi have known each other for so long. She definitely understands what he means. Nuru Hatchi just quietly chuckles with amusement, and she begins to crack her knuckles, with a creepy smile asking Takumi if he really intends to challenge her right now. Takumi freezes completely. He realizes that she did not understand him at all, and she thinks that he wants to provoke a fight. Leia bursts in, praises him for his brave words, and adds that if he agreed to let the witch stay, the witch would be fully ready to kill everyone, and then herself so. Takumi looks exhausted and begs her to be quiet. He just needs her not to complicate an already confusing situation. Yes, suddenly Nuru Hatchi releases a colossal dark aura and asks Takumi if he is sure about this, because he definitely knows what awaits those who oppose her. The boy trembles incessantly with fear, thinking to himself, "This is bad, I am seriously about to pee my pants," but suddenly Leia reaches out to stop him and says, "Wait just a second," because she is. She steps in front of him and says that she sees he is trembling with battle excitement, but this time let her handle it herself. Takumi realizes that Leia is misinterpreting the situation to her advantage, but it makes him very tense because she boldly approaches the witch and loudly says that she, Takumi's student, will be her opponent. Nuru Hatchi finds it interesting that Leia is a student of both Alice and Takumi, so he agrees to take her. While this is happening, Takumi looks around and sees Chloe nearby doing squats, so he asks, "What are you even doing?" Chloe says that she is just preparing to fight whoever wins this match, and this completely confuses Takumi. She asks if this is some kind of battle royale where the survivors fight, but Takumi immediately shouts that she is wrong. He turns back to the main fight and shouts that killing each other is not allowed, begging them to keep it as a safe training fight. But Leia completely ignores him, focuses, and decisively announces that she is going on the attack. Chloe sits aside and suddenly shudders fearfully. She realizes that the girl is actually using a technique called God Possession. Nuru Hatchi, with a maniacal smile, says that she heard. Leia fights by giving her body to the god, and now she can finally act at full power. Leia rushes forward, looks furious and ready to cut the witch in half, but Takumi intervenes and decisively says to Nuru Hatchi enough, and stops the fight on the spot. Nuru Hatchi looks around and asks if he is interrupting, because he wants to kiss her for the victory or something like that. He waved off the joke and said that they cannot be together forever, but she can visit anytime. He promises to wear the bell like before and begs her, "Just go home today." She smiles and says that nothing can be done this time. She will do a favor and turn a blind eye. But before leaving, she stopped and told him that she had one specific warning for him. She points out that Leia's power is similar to Alice's power, but it won't last. Takumi says he knows. She was about to talk about his character, but stopped and decided to keep that thought to herself. Without hesitation, she orders Chloe to carry her home, although the dragon girl says she wants to stay with Takumi. The dragon girl is pulled into the sky. She shouts to the witch, "Don't touch my horns, they are very sensitive." And as soon as they disappear, Takumi turns around to make sure Leia is okay. She only groans in response, but suddenly she grabs him in a suffocating embrace. You can hear his bones cracking, and he screams for his life. She sobs uncontrollably and apologizes to him, completely ignoring that she is breaking his body in the process. He barely manages to say, "It's okay," trying to look cool, although he is clearly in pain. He raises his broken, limp arm and calmly says, "Don't worry, that witch is a true sage. She can't be defeated anyway." But Leia finds no comfort. She trembles with despair and admits that she was simply too immature back then. She explains that during the fight, she allowed the humiliating words of Nuru Hatchi to creep into her head and throw her off track. Takumi listens as she confesses that the witch brought her past to light, a past she hadn't even told her mistress Alice about yet. Takumi's face instantly goes blank. He understands that a flashback is about to begin, one that will last a long time. Takumi looks too serious, but in reality, he is panicking about the rice harvest. He needs to finish this conversation as soon as possible. Leia raises her eyes to him with tears in her eyes, ready to start her emotional story, but suddenly Takumi interrupts her, takes a confident stance, and says she doesn't need to say anything. He already understands everything. Leia holds her breath in disbelief. She is sure that he saw all her tragic past just by looking into her eyes. So Takumi flawlessly plays along, throws the hoe over his shoulder and confirms, "That's exactly how it was." He turned to leave, quietly rejoicing at the time saved. He definitely didn't want to get stuck listening to someone's heavy traumatic stories. Step by step, walking towards the mountains, Leia seriously asks him what she needs to do to finally break free from that pass. Takumi carelessly throws out a lazy piece of advice: "Why don't you just try not to worry?" He adds that in nature, the past seems to shrink to a trifle and loses weight. He says this trying to sound profound. But Leia didn't understand at all. She is stunned that he could call her trauma a trifle, even after learning the truth. Takumi nervously babbles some nonsense about the wind that blows away the past. He is completely improvising, and Leia looks at him as if he were a genius, but it is this very look that makes Takumi remember the past. He begins to recall how he first found Alice as a child and tried his best to raise her properly. But he knew he was the weakest here, and by staying close to her, he only dragged everyone down. He finally admits to himself that the real reason he stopped being an adventurer back then was not at all to escape Nuru Hatchi. He was simply already too weak to stand beside Alice and not feel like a burden. He remembers Nuru Hatchi's harsh words, saying that his resemblance to Alice would not last long. He thinks one more training session to regain form, maybe that will fix it. But after 10 years in retirement, his frail body became even weaker. Now even a goblin would probably deal with him. He decides to just play along with this masterful performance until Leia is satisfied and finally decides to leave. Takumi realizes that he doesn't need to teach her at all. Leia is simply becoming stronger on her own. So he decides that at least for now, it's not worth bothering, let her play the role and he will behave with her like a worthy master. Leia smiles broadly and tells him that next time she will definitely win because she hugged him so tightly. She clenches her fists and says that now she has much more strength inside her than when she used the god mode. Takumi gets nervous seeing how she is practically boiling with excitement, so he asks her to calm down and not rush for now. He says that Nuru Hatchi will probably continue to appear, so he advises her to fight less intensely next time. Leia shouted a powerful yes in response to his orders, her voice echoing over the quiet fields nearby. But as soon as the moment passed, Takumi frowns with irritation. Nuru Hatchi appears again in his mind. He thinks she will come every day, but in his soul he begs her to give him a break and come only once a week. Meanwhile, the witch raises her eyes, smiles slyly, and asks if Alice has finally appeared. A terribly gloomy look appears on Nuru Hatchi's face, and she says threateningly that she will get rid of anyone who dares to approach Takumi. She looks directly at the other girl and notices that she now has a very tense expression on her face. But Nuru Hatchi smiles and admits that, to be honest, she is making the same grimace herself. The girl covers her mouth as if caught off guard and admits that yes, Nuru Hatchi might really be right. The frame takes us back to their childhood, and we see the moment when Takumi bought a sword for the still young Nuru Hatchi. And it turned out that Alice eventually held in her hands the very weapon that Takumi left many years ago. But here is the wonder. Although everyone calls her the Holy Sword, Alice is actually not a swordswoman at all, and she simply really hits people, that's all, but her strike is stronger than any other attack in the whole world. Magic does not affect Alice, and Nuru Hatchi suddenly realizes she will have to keep all her magic inside herself to make herself physically stronger. She takes a fighting stance and says she is going for her appearance. It seems the time has finally come to start a fight. Nuru Hatchi does not hold back and rushes into attack, and Alice launches a massive attack against her. Nuru Hatchi shouts that she will fight directly, no cheap tricks, only an honest, open fight. So she decides not to dodge. She puts all her strength into this moment, and Alice's fist hits Nuru Hatchi's face with a dull thud, a brutal blow that shook the whole room. The blow threw Nuru Hatchi back, her body flew and pressed deeply into the stone wall of the chamber. She slipped from the shock and realized that hit is crazy. All her magic reserve instantly dissipated. Beaten and sweaty, she looked at Alice and, gasping, asked if she was going to finish this right now, but when Alice told her no, she just wanted to make sure that Nuru Hatchi wouldn't be able to see Takumi for at least some time. She clenches her fist and says that she has had enough. She loudly and clearly stated her position, and even Nuru Hatchi has to admit she is right. Her magic is now completely exhausted, so she can't even teleport away from here. Nuru Hatchi looks at the castle and decides enough. She will just pretend to be dead for a while until her wounds heal. But she has one burning question, so she raises her gaze and asks Alice why she sent Leia to Takumi in the first place. Since Alice doesn't really explain, Nuru Hatchi decides she has no choice. She will have to use magic right here and read Alice's thoughts. As soon as she connects, she completely loses herself. She can't believe how strong the emotions pouring from Alice are. She is gripped by horror. How can a person hold so many emotions inside while keeping such a calm face? But then she sees the truth. Nuru Hatchi realizes that Alice has lived her whole life only for Takumi, but that's not the craziest part because she also sees. Alice sincerely believes that Takumi is much stronger than her. For her, this is already a fact. Tears well up in Nuru Hatchi's eyes, and she admits that she is actually beginning to understand where Alice's feelings come from now. So Alice steps away, and Nuru Hatchi watches her go, thinking that everyone comes into the world with different capacity, as if with their own vessel for the soul. And some people have huge containers that hold anything from colossal riches to entire kingdoms or even the whole world. Nuru Hatchi freezes before the overflowing cup and realizes even people with big souls cannot endure those like her or Alice. She admits to herself that the only person made to clean up their mess is Takumi. He is the only one who can endure it. She remembers how once Takumi smiled at her with a silly smile and asked if this training would finally make him strong. So she burst out shouting, "Stop immediately," warning that if he continues he will simply die. Nuru Hatchi came to and firmly said to Alice, "Don't look down on me, I am not an ordinary person." And she announces her real name, Chilt, the great wise and leader of her clan, emphasizing all her titles as she gains strength. She shouts that Takumi belongs to her people and she will not give him to anyone, but then her voice breaks off because, in the middle of the sentence, she was literally folded in half by a powerful blow to the stomach, and she instantly fell silent. Meanwhile, Leia completely misunderstood the situation. She thought they needed milk, so she gladly rushed to run and buy it. Takumi looks nervous and immediately cuts this off. He says he will go himself, and she must stay and guard the house. Leia stubbornly does not let him go, saying she will not allow him to be burdened with trivial work, so she prepares to call the god of speed to rush there instantly. Takumi panics, wildly waves his hands, and shouts at her to just go normally and not activate any crazy powers. He grabs a pen, quickly writes a list, and tells her to buy 2 liters of milk and spend the rest of the change on some cheap sword and shield. Leia salutes and shouts that she will stake her life on this first mission, but Takumi tells her to calm down. Dying is not part of the mission. He looks at the path. Since it leads straight to the city, he believes she will return by noon, so he decides to trust her. Later, Leia comes in and shouts, "I'm home," carrying a huge live cow on her back and holding Alice by the hand, while Takumi just watches and asks how that happened. He looks at her smiling face, trying to understand why he sent her to the store for milk, and she instead brought an entire animal. Then he examines her gear and notices a sword that is clearly too expensive for the budget he gave her. He begins to panic because the weapon radiates an incredibly ominous aura that screams trouble. But that's not the end. He notices something else and completely freezes. Takumi looks at the huge thing on his back, sweating profusely, and she asks, "Is this supposed to be a shield?" Leia smiles as if nothing happened and says, "No, this is definitely not a shield." Takumi falls to the ground, completely broken and in shock, not understanding how a simple run for milk turned into such a mess. He looked at the little elf standing there and asked her name. She lightly touched her chin and replied that her name was Chiharu. He says the name again to be sure, and she happily folds her hands and says, "Aha, I am Chiharu." Leia explained that the child was found in the city with amnesia, so no one has any clue who her parents are or where she is from. But when the child called Leia while passing by, Leia felt some connection between them and decided to take her in. Takumi looks at the girl and starts to panic wildly, asking Leia if she seriously does not recognize who this child really is. Leia says this must be their first meeting, but admits that for some reason she feels like she has seen that girl somewhere before. The girl points her finger right at his face and shouts his name, proving that she definitely knows who he is. Takumi turns to that mysterious girl, sweating a little, and asks if she really knows who he is. Chiharu joyfully raises her hands up and chirps that she definitely knows him, and Leia too, so. Leia suddenly gasps, her eyes wide open. A crazy idea flashes through her mind. She turns to Takumi and starts asking if maybe this child really is. Their daughter Leia, who returned from the future, blushes deeply, and Chiharu just stands nearby looking self-satisfied. Then everything spirals into a huge delirium. They ramble about how the timeline converges, and that this child must be here to change the future, full of despair, where they are already a married couple. Takumi instantly covers Chiharu's eyes with his palm and says that obedient children don't look at that crazy woman right now. He decides to completely ignore Leia's outburst and says he will just go milk the cow and cook potato soup, but he freezes sitting next to the animal and asks Leia, why did she bring a whole live cow home instead of just buying a carton of milk? Leia explains that she did go to buy milk, but goblins attacked the ranch. She destroyed them all, so the farmers gave her a whole cow as a thank you. Takumi nods and tells her, well done, imagining that she only fought off a couple of weaklings with a stick, completely unaware of what she actually did. Leia laughs loudly, and a flashback reveals the truth. She didn't just fight a few guys, she completely annihilated a huge goblin army. She proudly says, being his student, I defeated hundreds of enemies, so essentially all the credit belongs to him. Takumi laughed, still convinced that she fought only 2 or 3 weaklings and is just exaggerating everything. He decides to stop the hero talk and serves dinner an exquisite bowl of cool, roughly mashed potato soup. He smiles at the little elf girl and says she doesn't need to hurry. He prepared a huge portion for seconds. Chiharu is simply delighted. She stuffs food into her mouth and cheerfully exclaims that the potato here does all the hard work. Leia is also delighted. She almost cries from the texture and excitedly says that the creamy soup still feels like eating real potatoes, and she looked at the three sitting together by the fire and happily said that now they really look like a family. But suddenly she slips back into delirium and whispers that this homely atmosphere proves Chiharu is their child from the future. So, Takumi points out that two people cannot give birth to an elf child, and Chiharu beams and says she is totally fine with calling them mom and dad. Leia smugly says that Chiharu has fully accepted the family order, but Takumi shouts that he accepts none of this. He is in panic because he is still a virgin, and somehow he is being forced to have a wife and child. So desperately he switches to the sword that Leia bought earlier, throws out that it looks very expensive, and asks if she really had enough cash. Leia says the price was actually too low. Apparently, no one had been able to master this very sword for centuries, and it just drifted into this rural town. So Takumi asks what she meant by master it, and she, as if nothing special, reveals this weapon is the demonic sword Soul Eater. Takumi breaks out in sweat while she explains in detail that the sword drains the power of its wielder and is said to literally devour their soul. Takumi freezes in horror, realizing his guess was correct. Before him is a real cursed sword. Leia admits that it is not as amazing as the holy sword Takuma Caliber, which he supposedly gave to Alice, but still considers it a decent weapon. Takumi completely ignores the compliment, sharply turns his head and shouts, "What the hell does Takumi Caliber mean?" Turned out that the sword that Nuru Hatchi once bought him was renamed, after he left it at Alice's now. It is absurdly called Excalibur Mass Immune Takuma Caliber. Takumi wonders how his old cheap equipment was somehow elevated and is now considered one of the three sacred swords of the world. But he needs to focus here and now. He draws the soul-eating sword and asks Leia if she really tried to use it herself. So she falls to the floor and confesses. She tried it in the store, it instantly sucked all her power out, and she almost died on the spot. Takumi immediately tells her that it is too dangerous and orders her to go and return it immediately, but Leia just smiled and waved it off as if to say, if it is in Takumi's hands, the curse definitely won't harm him. Later that evening, Chiharu calls him, so Takumi casually asks if she already feels like sleeping. She tells him that a bunch of things have come, and it turns out the whole house is surrounded by monsters. A huge crowd of angry goblins was advancing on them, glaring with stern, watchful eyes. Leia screams his name in panic, and Takumi realizes with horror that they were probably being followed all the way to the house. He sternly tells Leia that this is her mess, let her fix it herself, orders her to get to work, and she only apologizes for the trouble caused. Leia shocks everyone. She says that the magical sword in the shop sucked all her energy, so she cannot fight, and Takumi realizes that he is completely doomed. Behind the hut, everything gets worse. The rumble of the goblin army grows louder and creeps closer. So Takumi forces himself to pretend to be tough, tells Leia to watch carefully, and she willingly hands him that cursed weapon. He took a combat stance and whispered the last order, "If I die, grab Chiharu and run." But as soon as he grabbed the handle, his face twisted in shock. Something is clearly wrong here. And he screams in panic that this weapon really drains his strength from his body. Everything becomes even crazier. Suddenly, a foreign voice rings directly in his head, so And then he finally realized, the sword has its own mind and is trying to suck the life out of him. But Takumi decides to risk everything. He shouts to the sword, "Take my soul if that is the only way to save my friends." The sword simply replies that it doesn't have even a millimeter of strength to give, and Takumi remains completely confused. Takumi just froze while the sword told him that it is truly impossible, seriously impossible. The sword says it has long been magical, but for the first time in its life, meets a person completely without strength. Leia stands behind, watching and admiring him enthusiastically, because she cannot believe that he is holding the soul devourer and standing so calmly. She understands, his strength seems endless, so even a legendary magical sword could not drain it completely. Takumi tells her that she is absolutely right, but inside, he screams that she is completely wrong. The sword ignores them and angrily explains maliciously that everyone born in this world has their own vessel for power. It says that power fills from the moment of birth, so it asks, why damn it does Takumi have none at all? That's it. Takumi awkwardly apologizes to the air and honestly says he doesn't know what makes everything strange because Leia asks him in surprise what he is talking about. She doesn't hear the voice he is responding to at all. Suddenly he realizes, only he hears this sword, and now he is already a strange old man talking to himself. The goblins stand and look at him, nervously chattering among themselves. They do not understand at all what is happening. Takumi notices that they keep their distance from him and understands. They are frightened by the dark aura of the magical sword, so he decides to take advantage of the mood. He puts on a desperate smile and politely asks the sword, the Lord of Magic, if it will defeat the goblins instead of him. The sword immediately interrupts him, asking gruffly why, damn it, it should help some powerless guy, and Takumi awkwardly admits that there is sense in that. But the sword suddenly changes tone and says that the little girl standing over there actually has an incredible amount of power. It tells Takumi that if he allows it to regularly drain her energy, it might agree to help him. Takumi nervously asks if it promises to hold back a little. The sword agrees and assures him that it wouldn't want to ruin such a valuable thing that would just be a waste. That was enough for Takumi, so the contract was officially made right there on the spot. The sword said it was time to quickly clean up this mess, and suddenly piles of dark energy spheres began to appear around them. And Takumi swings his blade, unleashing a colossal attack called Evil Dragon, Dark Great Fireball, to wipe everything off the face of the earth. Takumi shouts the name of the attack, but the sword immediately teases him, asking why he had to scream like that. It's incredibly cringy and humiliating so. The goblins barely have time to panic before the attack hits. And suddenly a huge pillar of dark energy bursts out. It explodes, leveling the entire forest and carrying the goblins away with it. When the dust settles, Leia is wildly excited and says he is incredible, while Takumi is actually just exhausted and trying not to fall. So Leia came up with her own explanation. She says he was just standing there with a blank look, but that is probably the legendary emptiness needed for this technique. Takumi is all sweaty because she is completely wrong, but he pretends to be calm and tells her she understood everything perfectly. The sword whispers that the matter is done and asks Takumi to keep his promise. Takumi quietly agrees, and at that moment Leia runs up and immediately starts gaslighting her, pressuring her to fulfill the deal, scolding her, saying that allowing such a sword to drain her energy is only proof of how inexperienced she still is. Leia immediately believed and apologized, saying that now she truly feels the huge difference in power between them. And she shouts that compared to Takumi's power, her own strength is just junk. Takumi cries inside, admitting to himself that he is actually just complete trash, but he continues to pretend, telling Leia that besides peeling potatoes, she will now have to endure daily training with the magical sword, which drains all her strength. Leia bows deeply and sincerely thanks him for the incredible honor, the opportunity to undergo another training course, while Takumi simply feels guilty for lying. But the little elf points forward and warns Takumi that many enemies lie ahead. At that very moment, a huge horde of monsters appeared on the hill crest. They were looking straight at them. Takumi pales as he realizes this is no joke, there are too many of them. He tries to summon his weapon, but the magical sword bluntly states that the workday is over for today. Takumi reached his limit and collapsed, thinking that this time it's the end, when finally a huge dragon breaks through the trees with a roar and lets out a terrible bellow, simply the scariest thing that could happen. Takumi completely loses his head and screams when he sees the dragon looking threateningly into his eyes. The dragon roared over the battlefield, called the goblins fools, and demanded to know if they understood who they were facing. He loudly announces to the entire army that the man standing there is their very Dragon King himself, Lord Takumi. Takumi, drenched in sweat, looks up and realizes that this huge creature is actually Chloe in the form of a dragon. But she turns back into human form again to officially report. She heard that the goblin army is approaching the mountain and rushed here immediately. Takumi is completely confused and asks aloud why this is happening, since Leia only beat a few goblins at the ranch. Chloe tells him that rumors are going around the city. Supposedly, Lord Takumi himself exterminated so many goblins that it shook the entire country. She says that the Goblin King himself is leading the army to defeat him, and Takumi suddenly realizes this has escalated into a full-scale war. Chloe adds that the Dragon Clan considers themselves his subordinates and therefore intercept the enemy, but there are so many goblins that they cannot stop them all. Takumi tries to stay calm in front of her, and stammering awkwardly, says that he understands and thanks her for the hard work. But inside he realizes that without them there would be even more enemies here, so he is grateful, though he quietly insists that he definitely will not become the Dragon King. Chloe continues to tell the story while dragons set the forest on fire, saying that this trouble will not end until they defeat the Goblin King who leads the army. And she admits that even with all the power of the Dragon Clan on their side, they still haven't managed to find him. Takumi looks puzzled, so Chloe explains. According to rumors, the Goblin King is a sorcerer and can transform into anything. Suddenly, Leia bursts into the conversation, overly happy, and announces that she is fully charged and ready to go. She says, although it's a hassle, let's just solve the problem, wipe out every goblin in this area. Takumi and Chloe just freeze, staring at her, and Takumi says that she really just needs an excuse to let loose. Leia panicked and shouted back that he misunderstood everything, but she didn't waste a second before. And she activated the skill Divine Ascension and summoned the Vermilion King to enhance her power. It turned out she really wanted to fight. Her face becomes completely wild, and she screams that she will trample every enemy into the mud. And she unleashes a colossal attack. The entire landscape shatters into pieces, stones and debris fly in all directions. Chloe asks if the Goblin King is hiding somewhere in the army, and a random goblin standing right nearby, who just happens to be the undercover king, nervously says he knows nothing. She ignores the roar and turns back to Takumi, asking if he senses anything suspicious nearby. Takumi raised his weapon and says that the magic sword literally talks to him, and this is clearly suspicious. He starts sweating and stammering, tries to explain that it is just a misunderstanding. Chloe immediately recognizes the voice. It is an evil dragon sealed in the sword, a true disgrace for their entire clan. The sword understands that hiding no longer makes sense, so it clicks its tongue and admits that its disguise is exposed. Chloe is fascinated. This sword drains life force, so she believes that Takumi is incredibly strong because he holds it, although he is actually just trembling with fear. But suddenly her attention is distracted. She notices a small elf girl nearby and asks about the child as if she recognizes her. Takumi panics and shouts that Chiharu is not the Goblin King, and Chloe says she knows this because she sees he is actually new. Chiharu instantly loses her temper and shouts at Chloe, "Shut up," because she is about to reveal her secret identity. So briefly, Leia today brought along that little Chiharu with braids. And Chiharu is standing right there with the magic sword, but suddenly everything goes awry when right in front of them the ground splits from a huge explosion, and debris flies in all directions. Takumi shouts Chloe's name in pure panic, not understanding why she just attacked them. And she just looks down on him from above, and with a note of admiration in her voice, says that he is surprisingly clever for a person to survive in such a place. Then the enemy leader steps forward, a handsome elf who called himself the Goblin King Jasre. As soon as Takumi heard the name Jasre, he immediately gave up on life and muttered that it was all over for him. He immediately sees this Goblin King is incredibly strong, so he turns back to his weapon, with tears in his eyes, begging the magical sword to save him from this man. The sword instantly shuts him down, reminding him that it only works once a day and its shift is officially over. Jasre smiles as if he owns the place and asks Takumi if they should start already, And here Takumi completely freezes, sweat pouring down, and stammering, barely coherently says the English "nice to meet you." Then we see a flashback titled "The Story of the Goblin King." It turns out he started life as the absolutely weakest monster. Compared to all the other huge muscular goblins of his tribe, this little goblin looked incredibly pathetic. This was back in ancient times, so a weakling like him should have died on the spot. But he was such a terrible coward that his ability to sense danger was simply beyond all limits compared to everyone else. He told himself, "As long as I survive, I will become strong later," so he focused only on one thing to stay alive. For over 1,000 years, he hid in the darkness, quietly accumulating knowledge and power while time went on. And eventually that little goblin changed. He was constantly transforming until he mastered magic that no one else could overcome and finally became the strongest Goblin King standing here today. Takumi understands that this whole tale about effort and never giving up is not just a story. It is real life, and a living legend from that story stands right in front of him. Jasre begins clapping his hands and he smiles and tells Takumi that he was truly touched to hear his old story just like that, although he understands that Takumi was just stalling for time. Takumi breaks out in sweat. His plan to buy time failed instantly. But the Goblin King simply leans closer and admits that Takumi really interested him, and he has been interested in him for a long time. He definitely wants to know exactly what kind of guy sits at the very top of the adventure, ranking as the strongest in the universe, so Takumi awkwardly tries to brush it off, stammering that it is not a problem at all, but Jasre is not fooled by this modest display. He ignites his magic and declares that his ancient skills will surely measure how strong the opponents are. But he suddenly becomes confused and tells Takumi that for the first time in his life, his magic has completely fallen silent. He simply cannot read his power level at all. Takumi just shouts the truth right in his face. The readings are empty because his power is literally zero. Jasre is indifferent to the numbers. He says he is thrilled and wants to fight right now, while Takumi turns away in tears, saying he just wants to go home, but Then suddenly Jasrek's eyes snapped open sharply. He felt something approaching and realized, it seems they won't be able to fight. Suddenly a huge burst of dark energy explodes right between them, tearing the ground from under their feet and scattering them in different directions. Jasrek looks tense, admitting that he did not sense the attacker until the last second, exactly what he expects from a great sage. Chiharu appears incredibly furious and shouts at the Goblin King to shut up and stop pretending to be so cool. It's complicated. Takumi begins to interrogate her about the connection with Nuru Hatchi, but she cuts him off mid-sentence. No time to explain, we'll talk later. She rushed straight into battle, shouting wave gun, and unleashed a huge explosion of energy downward. Jasre crossed his arms to block the hail of blows and immediately understood. This technique definitely belongs to Nuru Hatchi. Takumi watches from the side and finally begins to wonder, is there really a deep connection between Chiharu and this Nuru Hatchi? Action. Chiharu aims at the enemy with her finger like a gun and simply says, bang. Takumi anxiously asks if that strike hit, but immediately answers himself, no. Jasre notices that Chiharu is barely holding on with her last strength and cannot maintain form, so Takumi panics and shouts her name. He suddenly becomes very serious and says there is no point in living if he runs away and leaves the child behind, so. He shouts that he will handle this himself, no matter what. Suddenly a strange, barely audible pop comes from the sword's hilt. And the sword really spoke. All right, I'll do you a special favor and help one last time. Takumi fires a huge explosion from his weapon that spreads everywhere, but Jasre deflects it with one hand and admits that he is already a bit tired of this power. Chloe gets caught in the explosion and screams at the top of her lungs when suddenly Leia appears out of nowhere and with a smile announces that she has already taken care of everything for Takumi. The smoke from the explosion clears and reveals Leia standing guard, while Takumi calls her from behind. Jasre just shrugged indifferently and said that this situation is a complete waste of time. And he tells Takumi that he really attracts some crazy ones, first a great sage, and now a dragon's apprentice and a demonic sword. He raises his eyes to the moon through a hole in the cave's ceiling, as if he is tired of how everything turned out. He mutters to himself that he feels a slight chill in the air, maybe instincts are awakening. He sneers at Takumi and admits that, it turns out, you can't reach the strongest in the universe without first defeating all the others. He adjusts his glove, sighs it's too troublesome, so he says he is stepping back for today. The boy turns with a dramatic gesture, his huge cloak rustling behind him as he turns to leave, but he is not finished yet. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge sphere of magical energy bursts forth and rushes straight at the group. Chloe instantly notices the attack, prepares to block it, and shouts, what audacity he has. Leia notices something in the distance, instantly points to the cave entrance and shouts, he's there. Chloe flies in and asks if he used some trick to escape, and Leia shouts that they need to catch him and put an end to this. The girls rush away, and Takumi just stands still and calmly says he will not chase them, he is fine where he is. The truth is rather sad. Watching the dust settle, he simply asks if anyone really thinks he can run that fast. He stands there all alone when suddenly, a voice sounds right behind his back and calls him absolutely terrible. Jasre stands in the shadows and tells Takumi that Takumi himself is the first person who has ever figured out his last trick. Takumi is all sweaty. He realizes that the others were chasing the mannequin, so he was left alone with the boss and is about to die. But Jasre completely misread this fear. He raised his hands up and says that Takumi is on a much higher level than he imagined. He holds his hands in the air and says to Takumi, come on, finish me, this is my complete defeat. The moon shines light on the quiet battlefield, and Takumi freezes and asks himself, why is this happening again? And so a completely crazy fight to the death with the Goblin King suddenly and strangely ends. The magical sword hanging at Takumi's side spoke and asked Takumi if he was really sure it was okay not to finish off that guy. Takumi waved his hand and told the sword that the enemy probably won't come back, so everything is fine. The sword calls him completely naive and says that such a person won't survive, then blushes and adds that maybe it will just protect him because he is helpless. Takumi turns around and asks if the magical sword just said something, but she instantly cuts him off. I said nothing. The goblin problem is solved, but Takumi realizes that problems are accumulating. The mystery of Chiharu, the story with the Dragon King, and Leia's training. He is literally drenched in sweat when it dawns on him that the list of unsolved cases on his shoulders is only growing and growing. He looks into the distance, thinking about what will happen to him, while the sword simply admires his side profile, pondering how gloomy and thoughtful he looks. But in reality, it's much less cool. Takumi's legs tremble so much that he admits to himself, any second now, he will wet his pants. Meanwhile, Jasre has completely broken down. He feels utterly powerless against this guy and realizes he was foolish to think he could ever escape. Jasre leans back, trembling, suddenly realizing he is standing before the strongest warrior of humanity, and completely loses his courage. He panics, thinking they saw every move he made, so he decides there is only one humiliating way out. The king falls to his knees and cries out for mercy, ready to humiliate himself at any cost just to survive. But he raises his eyes and instantly realizes his plan has failed. A huge fist is already flying straight at his face. Leia punches him with all her might while he bows, shouting that he caused Takumi too much trouble. The blow hits powerfully and sends the enemy soaring into the sky like a rocket. And Leia drags the beaten goblin back, apologizing to Takumi because she thinks she only caught a fake. Takumi reassures her, "Don't worry, I made that guy swear he would never come back here again." She asks if he really found the real body, and behind her a goblin is running, saving his life. Takumi just watches as the kid rushes away and says that the guy was sobbing uncontrollably, apologizing. Leia begins to enthusiastically praise him, saying that only he saw the real enemy while everyone else was deceived. She fully believes this, and she can't believe it. He deliberately let the Goblin King go, and that's twice as scary because every time he escapes, he becomes stronger. She says that Takumi challenges the enemy to return when he becomes stronger, as if it's some cool warrior gesture. Takumi is sweating heavily, but forces himself to smile and tells her that she perfectly figured out his plan. But deep inside, he is completely lost and doesn't even understand what hidden message he is talking about. Still, he tells everyone, "Well done," and offers Chloe some potato soup left from yesterday. She politely smiles and says she would gladly join, but they are already going inside. Chloe suddenly shuddered and froze, as if she felt something strange. She turns to him, looks with a serious expression on her face, and calls him by name. She apologizes for the question, but still wants to know, will he give up the magic sword he keeps with him? Takumi asks her what will happen if he really gives it away. She looks him straight in the eyes and says, "I will break that thing in half with my bare hands." It sounds quite tense, so Takumi sweats a little and asks her to tell the whole story behind it, but Chloe starts from afar, enthusiastically telling how once a true genius was born in the dragon clan. They said this dragon had so much talent that he would later become stronger even than the ancient dragon. And everyone pinned wild hopes on him, considering him a candidate for the next Dragon King. Takumi listens, but in his soul he only thinks that this story has dragged on too long, and his soup is already cooling. Chloe does not calm down. She says the genius got talent stuck in his head and started doing nonsense. Soon it turned into an evil dragon, lost its real name, and was forever banished from the clan. Takumi nervously glances at the weapon at his side and repeats to himself, "Evil dragon." Suddenly, the sword interrupts the story and exclaims, "I'm really not evil, it's all just a big misunderstanding." But Chloe pays no attention to the voice at all and continues, telling that the banished dragon harbored resentment and provoked quarrels with the clan every day just for petty revenge. She says that the clan finally lost patience with the constant harassment, so they sealed the evil dragon in a demonic sword so that it would finally be silent. The sword began to nervously sweat and muttered that it did not remember doing anything like that at all, and Takumi realized that the weapon on his belt really spoke. Chloe points directly at the blade and throws out an explosive truth. This evil dragon is not just some monster, but actually her older sister Cara. Takumi completely loses his head during the revelation, jumps back, and shouts in complete shock, "Sister." Chloe insists even more, looking seriously. The demonic sword is called Cara, and she really is her shameful older sister. The sword intervenes again in that casual tone, agreeing yes, it's true, Chloe is really her younger sister. Takumi looks at Chloe with anxiety in his eyes and asks if she really intends to break the sword in half, even though they are family. Chloe does not hesitate. She explains that her foolish sister is now, while sealed, absorbing power to resurrect. Chloe says tensely that she simply must stop that resurrection so Takumi asks if it really would be so bad if her sister came back to life. And she confirms that it would be a disaster. She insists that her sister would immediately return to commit endless evil. Takumi tightly grips the hilt and directly asks the sword if that is really so, but Cara immediately objects, swearing not to do evil anymore and sincerely asking Kuchin for forgiveness. Chloe, noticeably puzzled by his strange behavior, hesitantly asks Takumi if he really talked to the sword and he confirms it, suddenly realizing that Chloe does not hear her sister's voice at all. She says that probably only the true owner of the sword can hear it, so he is the only one in the world. Curiosity takes over. She asks him if the sword happens to say anything about her right now. Takumi conveys her message word for word. She really has been thinking about her actions and sincerely apologizes to Kuchin. Chloe quietly whispers her sister's nickname, seeming a little confused by the sword's sudden apology. She told Takumi that she doesn't quite trust this, but since he is holding the sword today, she will turn a blind eye to it. She is about to leave and says that even if the sword tries to become evil, he is strong enough to easily deal with it. Takumi watched her walk away, sweating profusely, and thought to himself that he definitely couldn't do that. Later, Chiharu tries to get his attention by poking and squeezing his cheeks and calling him by name, so he glanced at the letter nearby. The Goblin King and Chiharu's mystery still interest him, but he decides not to rush things. He looks at her and thinks, whoever she really is, she is so sweet right now, and that is quite enough for him. Finally, he picks up the envelope from the floor, breaks the seal, and looks inside to find out what is there. He immediately notices the headline, an official message addressed to everyone in the top 10 adventurers. In the letter shock, the ancient demonic king has resurrected, so the guild is immediately calling an emergency meeting for the top 10. Takumi decides to completely ignore that creepy letter from the guild, hides it, and tells himself he will pretend he never saw it after all. It's time for a nap. He happily switches to something much tastier and announces that today for lunch hot pot with mushrooms and chicken meatballs. He turns to Chiharu, who has already woken up, praises her gratefully for the food, and asks again if she was the one who gathered those mushrooms for them. Chiharu breaks into a wide smile and proudly tells him, "Yes, I went out and gathered them all myself." Suddenly the sword on his belt spoke. "The food looks delicious. Do you mind if you pour some broth on the blade later?" Takumi immediately rejects the idea, tells the sword that he categorically refuses because cleaning a sticky sword afterward is a real hassle. 3 days have passed since the Goblin King's attack, and life has finally returned to normal. He stands and scoops the costume. Soup, Takumi says it has been a long time since there were days when nothing happened, just a quiet, pleasant afternoon together with Chiharu. When suddenly a hand stretched out from behind and firmly grabbed him by the shoulder. Right there stands an old man with a long beard and asks the group, could they also pass him a bowl? Leia instantly jumps back into a fighting stance, reaches for her blade, and shouts at the invader, "Identify yourself." But the old man does not notice her at all. He just chews and mumbles how delicious the food is. He asks what dish it is and instantly guesses the meatballs contain crushed chicken cartilage. It turns out this gourmet is Barbaroi Saza himself, the head of the Adventurers Guild. Chiharu looks completely stunned when she sees him after all. This is the very person Nuru Hatchi previously said she never wanted to fight. Takumi immediately switches to boss mode and replies, explaining passionately that he mixed crushed lotus root with cartilage and added potato starch to thicken the broth. He wears a nervous smile on his face and, a bit tense, tells the leader that he should quite like this texture. Barbaroi doesn't even raise his eyes. He just loudly slurps the soup and mumbles again and again how tasty it is. The narrator notes, although Alice or the ancient dragon may have much more raw power, Barbaroi is the last person anyone wants to fight because Takumi remembered hearing about this guy's fighting style. What even the great sage Nuru Hatchi feared in him was. His entire strategy is simply to sneakily strike people in a cowardly way. The strategy is simple but insidious resort to any methods to catch the opponent by surprise and look weak and harmless. You must completely hide your energy, but only in that tiny fraction of a second. When you strike, you explode with power and with one blow knock them to the ground. Chiharu is still looking at him, not believing at all, mumbling about that old man, and he just sits and eats. Barbaroi felt the atmosphere, laughed, and asked if they hated him, then, like a kind grandfather, handed them a candy. Takumi looks at him and realizes the rumors turned out to be true. Barbaroi looks so weak that even Takumi thinks he might be able to defeat him. Suddenly the leader changes the subject and asks if they have seen the recent announcement from the 10 Greats, and Takumi honestly admits that he missed it. Barbaroi quietly says, "I understand," and his eyes suddenly lose all that friendly warmth. And then suddenly he kicked the entire cauldron of boiling soup right at them and indifferently said, "Nothing can be done." Leia reacted instantly. She drew her blade and shouted sharply to deflect the scalding blow before it hit them. Leia immediately intervened, shouting that it was just a provocation and demanding that everyone calm down, while Chiharu at the same moment rushed to protect Takumi. Barbaroi just cackles like a mad old man, apologizes, and admits that he attacked them only because he wanted to see how they would react. But his face becomes serious. He mutters that he tried to assess Takumi's strength, and if he didn't even flinch, then his power must be simply bottomless. He pushed the snow aside and tossed it into the fire, ironically mocking it over his head, as if its capabilities were too small to ever measure someone like Takumi. Takumi dies inside, thinking that he didn't hold back because he was strong. He was literally too scared to move even a single muscle. Well, the head gets down to business and says it would look very bad if the hero who holds first place doesn't show up at the meeting of the 10 greats. So he decided to cancel the meeting at the guild headquarters and hold the entire conference right here. Takumi froze with a blank look on his face, and a surprised sound escaped him when it dawned on him. Barbaroi adds with a slight smile that everyone else will appear any moment, and indifferently says that he doesn't need tea while waiting. He gestured to a figure in the shadow behind him, and calmly said that his subordinate would take on all the boring, rough work of this event. Takumi told that guy that he was leaving the guild, anyway he had already planned to retire, so he doesn't regret it at all. Leia got all worked up, shouting that Takumi throws away first place without any hesitation, and she considers his thinking simply incredible. She keeps insisting that he doesn't need any title, he is the strongest in the universe, and for her, that's just an unchanging fact. Barbaroi says he completely understands he knows that Takumi initially planned to go to the guild, only to remove his name from the ranking. Takumi replies that if he can speak directly to the head, he won't have to go, so everything works out perfectly, but Barbaroi ignores the tone and directly asks about the letter, saying that the revival of the ancestral Demon King is the reason for this meeting. The old man explains that they do not know where the Demon King is hiding, but in fact, they have known for 10 years he has returned to life. He raises 2 fingers and adds that the enemy is hiding his power somewhere, and that is basically all they know right now. Now Takumi is clearly irritated and asks what relation all this demonic stuff has to him quitting the guild, but Barbaroi completely ignores the question and simply addresses him formally, calling him the title of first-rank adventurer. Barbaroi shocked him with loud news. The guild actually suspects that Takumi is the main candidate for the next Demon King. Takumi completely loses his mind and asks if he is really being declared a villain just because of some big misunderstanding. Barbaroi ignores the panic, calmly says that the main point has already been made, and trusts the rest to his secretary and simply leaves. A woman in glasses steps forward and says that she is Linden, secretary to the head Barbaroi. She politely asks Takumi to remember her face from now on, but suddenly begins to show what she is capable of, because she is. In an instant, she erects a giant assembly hall right there, and Takumi begs them to stop building something in front of his house, but the hall is already ready. The next morning, as if on signal, high-ranking adventurers began gathering in the mountains one by one. By noon, everyone had already arrived, and Linden calmly sits sipping tea as if it were perfectly normal, while Takumi stands outside gloomy. He begs them to stop making his home a gathering place for all this madness, but it is already too late. The meeting table is set, and poor Takumi is stuck right there, surrounded by all the influential bosses. The meeting begins the head of Barbaroi Saza at rank 0 and right next to him the first in rank Takumi, literally drenched in sweat. Rank 2 the Goblin King Jasre, substituting for Eli's, while rank 3 little Chiharu, she waves happily, substituting for Nuru Hatchi. Then rank 4, the end of the hero, who seems to have completely fallen asleep, and right to his right the 5th rank, a half-machine named Machina. Rank 6 a beastman named Zaha, smiling like a maniac, and behind him rank 700 Dagon, and the secretive rank 8 named Yoro. Leia also sits there, the 9th in rank, a descendant of the gods, and finally, the group is completed by the 10th rank, the silent shield of Rick. The head Barbaroi immediately gets down to business and officially announces the start of the meeting of the 10 greats. And he announces that the main issue is the resurrection of the ancient Demon King and how they plan to deal with the main suspect, Takumi. He asks everyone to speak frankly, holding nothing back. So Takumi instantly breaks out in a sweat. He understands that this whole meeting is already based on the idea that he himself is the candidate for Demon King. Suddenly, Beastman interrupts the conversation and, full of rejection, asks, "What is all this for?" stating that this meeting is just a show, so it would be better to simply kill that man and end it. Behind Circa level 6, and Zaha just indifferently clicks a coin, hinting at murder, and Takumi completely panics. It seems to him that this is already too scary from the first call. Barbaroi calmly dismisses this and tells Zaha that this is not acceptable. First, real, indisputable evidence is needed. Zaha frowns angrily and says that this is a real hassle. He believes that it is better for them to just kill him, and if they are wrong, a simple sorry will fix everything. But then, in the middle of the dispute, a hand suddenly rises. Someone asks if they can ask a question. Intervened from the side, the 8th rank ninja Yoro says he heard everything about that chaos around Takumi lately. Everyone is listening now, even the 7th rank super hunter Dagon, who is watching everything closely. Yoru lists the facts, recalls how Leia became an apprentice, and how Takumi repelled the black dragon without even touching him. He adds that Takumi defeated the great sage Nuru Hatchi and the Goblin King's army, and asks if there is any mistake here. Takumi is sweating profusely, because this is almost the whole truth, and he begins to suspect that he himself might be the Demon King. Suddenly his sword interrupts, grumbling that they forgot to say that he got her, and she tells Takumi to correct them. Takumi instantly pleads with the weapon, "Please, shut up and be silent until I don't make things worse." Yoru ignores that small outburst and says that there is actually one more critically important addition to the list. He reveals that after Nuru Hatchi was repelled, Takumi's apprentice Alice attacked her, and now she is considered dead. Takumi is completely stunned to hear that she died, and asks Yoru if he is pretending to be stupid, because that was clearly his order. Suddenly the little girl Chiharu, who replaces the great sage, raises her voice and asks about Nuru Hatchi. And Takumi looks at her, pure panic is written on his face. He is truly worried about where this is leading, but Chiharu simply smiles brightly and tells everyone that Nuru Hatchi is completely fine and there is nothing to worry about. Fourth-rank hero, a boy named End, ignores her smile and asks why a small child is sitting in the place of the great sage. The head Barbaroi strokes his beard and says that it's not just because she is his colleague. He felt the aura of Nuru Hatchi on her. A strange expression appears on his face, and he says he has a theory. He assumes that she must be the secret child of Takumi and Nuru Hatchi. Leia loses her head and shouts if it's true, but Takumi asks her to calm down. He knows it's impossible because he has never been with anyone. The hero suddenly interrupts the tense scene, raises his hand, and says he has a few more important details he wants to add to the conversation. The cyborg girl of the fifth rank, Machina, stands aside and silently watches while he prepares to drop another bomb. In the end, it turns out that just 3 days after the defeat of the Goblin King, Takumi was noticed when he secretly met with Alisa. Goblin King Jasre, who is now disguised as a human, turns to Takumi and throws in his face, "Do you have even the slightest excuse for this secret meeting?" addressing him directly as Demon King Takumi, and Takumi desperately panics, points at him with his finger, and begs to say something to dispel the misunderstanding, but Jasre only smirks as if he likes it. So Jasre pulls out a scroll and announces that he actually brought a letter directly from Alisa herself. He begins to read and it is a complete failure. Alisa speaks incessantly that she is his unworthy student. Then there is a note from his beloved, and then she writes, "Wait, cut this part out," but still leaves it page after page of obsessed nonsense. Takumi simply stared into the void with deathly tired eyes, completely bewildered by how chaotic and humiliating this letter was. But Jasre repeatedly rereads Alice's words, where she apologizes for not coming, as if she were still too weak and unworthy even to show him her face. And then she dropped a bomb. She wrote that if the guild annoys him, she will simply kill them all for him. The mood in the room instantly froze. Even before anyone could react to the threat, suddenly as if out of nowhere a girl with cat ears appears and smiles at Takumi with a bright smile. She introduced herself as the king of beasts Mikis, calmly said she came to take him, and added meow at the end, as if it were perfectly normal. Zaberserk has heard enough. He grips his huge sword and says that now everything is confirmed, the conversation is over, and he will kill Takumi right here. Zaha wastes no time and swings his massive weapon down with all his might, but Make dodges the attack as if it were nothing at all. She licks her hand and looks at him coldly. It turns out she is actually one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon lord. The rumors that she is terrifying turned out to be true. Barbaroi intervenes to cool her overconfidence, saying that even with her title, she won't be able to handle such a number of powerful opponents alone. But Meiki just tilts her head, and, as if nothing happened, ninja-style tells the old man that she can actually handle all of them. The hero approaches next and challengingly asks if she can keep that confidence when she sees his Excalibur. While Machina activates slaughter mode, a real fight begins. Machina looks at her coldly, calls the one called King of Beasts just prey, and promises to finish her quickly and quietly. Suddenly the whole room explodes. A powerful blast tears the building apart. The roof is blown away. Debris flies everywhere. Takumi instantly starts shouting for them to stop, waving his arms and desperately begging everyone to cease the violence even for a second. But it's already too late. The dust settles, and Takumi remains sitting in his chair among the ruins, simply unable to get up, his back buckled from fear. He tries to look serious and suggests resolving this with words, but inside, he is just losing his mind. His home is being destroyed. Meiki instantly relaxes, says that if the Demon King tells her to stop, she fully agrees with that, but Barbaroi is not fooled by this game. He asks what there is left to discuss when there is ironclad evidence and everyone already knows who he is. Takumi breaks out in sweat but holds his ground, insisting that he has not confessed to anything yet. He sits amid the ruins, turns his gaze to the Beast Queen, and tells her that he has a question. He directly asks her why she thinks he is the Demon King, and wants to know if she has ever even seen that boy's face. Maki looks a bit puzzled for a moment, makes a meow sound, and simply admits that no, she has not. She explains that the Demon King transforms into a spirit and inhabits a human body only to control his incredible power. And because of this, she has never before been able to confirm what he really looks like. Takumi looks at her angrily. She is still scared inside and sharply asks, "If you don't know my face, then why did you call me the King of Demons?" She politely answers and admits that since the resurrection happened, she has been tracking a special energy signal of the King of Demons. Maik says that although the target is hiding their presence now, she just precisely felt the energy of the King of Demons right here. Takumi starts sweating as he processes this information. He muttered to himself, "Wait a second," and suddenly understood something huge, so he turns to the sword on his back and directly asks Karna if there is even the slightest chance that the King of Demons is actually inside him. Karna instantly shuts this down. She tells Takumi that the probability is absolutely zero because he doesn't even have a vessel that ordinary people have. She constantly teases him, saying that he is completely empty inside without a vessel to hold them. Neither power nor spirits can even stay in his body. Tears roll down Takumi's face because when he is called empty, it hurts, but he admits that although this insult stings, he truly feels relief. It confirms that the terrible possibility that he might be the King of Demons and not know it has finally disappeared. His eyes instantly opened wide and lit up with a serious look. Now that he is convinced there is no danger, his brain immediately got to the real problem. He glances at the group, points to the people, there are many here, not just him, and asks why she chose him as the suspect. Miki narrows her eyes and drops a significant hint. A few days ago, she actually met Alice. Maix explains that 10 years have passed since the Demon King was resurrected, and he has never shown his face, so the four heavenly kings decided to take matters into their own hands and began searching among people for a potential bearer. She throws the first name into their list and discovers that their main suspect is actually Alice. Maki says that even before the resurrection 10 years ago, Alice lived in a huge dungeon and had a power that is completely beyond human understanding. They were completely sure she was the one. Everywhere they looked, it seemed to them that the Demon Lord had chosen her as his bearer. Miki's was so confident that together with the other four heavenly kings, he visited Alice, but it turned out that Alice was not the Demon King at all. She was not the leader, so everyone asked her the obvious question: how could a person obtain a power that far exceeds human capabilities? Minutes, Takumi begins to sweat profusely. He mentally feels that he has a very bad premonition about where this story is heading. Maki raised a finger and said that Alice had only one answer, and she dropped a bomb. Alice openly told them that all of this was thanks to Takumi's advice. Takumi screams at the memory of how Alice insisted that it was a complete lie. She was already far beyond human when he found her in that dungeon, and Maix simply ignores him and says that now they cannot imagine anyone other than Lord Takumi, who is the Demon King. Someone else picks up and agrees that the matter is already settled, so Lyndon adjusts his glasses, shows his forged data, and boldly claims that he measured the probability 120. The best adventurers instantly become hostile. One grabs a blade to deal with the Demon King, and another warrior calls him the perfect final prey. Maskina also doesn't waste a second. She activates the Great Slaughter mode and announces that she is starting combat operations right now. Even Yoro prepares to strike, quietly muttering that he will annihilate the target, but Leia intervenes without the slightest hesitation, tells Takumi that everything is fine, and even if he really is the Demon King, she will follow him anywhere. Chiharu also joins the team, shouting that she will go with them at any cost, and Barbaroi bows his head and says that by Alice's order he will henceforth serve as Takumi's loyal subordinate. Even the armored warrior Rick steps forward from the end of the line and loudly declares that he will side with Takumi too. So Maki raised her claws and counted. She showed that the group split in half, so it's a 6 versus 6 fight. The team is already ready. Someone asks Takumi why he doesn't stand up to fight, but he only bends over the Soul Eater sword. Takumi is drenched in cold sweat because the truth is that he physically cannot stand up now. He is terribly scared. He lies on the floor trembling. His legs have completely given out from shock, and he is paralyzed with fear. Leia completely missed the mark. She proudly says that it's like with Takumi, as if he doesn't even have to deal with such weaklings. Chiharu immediately picked up on that delusion, and with a barely restrained smile, said that he has so much calmness that he will defeat everyone, even while sitting. Takumi understands that he has no choice but to pretend to believe in their crazy theory, so he forces his trembling lips to stretch into a restrained smile, and, leaning back on his stone throne like a true boss, he tells them that they did well, they figured it out. That was exactly his plan. He sits there and looks down on everyone with complete confidence, and so officially begins the legend of the Demon King Takumi. The head Barbaroi decides to ease the tension and suggests stopping the fight right here and now. And he offers a solution. Exactly 1 month from now, the Great Martial Arts Guild tournament will start. He proposes that both sides field a team of representatives, and the winner gets one specific wish granted. Takumi tries to stay calm, though sweat is pouring down him, and asks if the head really means that they can ask for anything. Barbaroi spread his arms and confidently confirmed, the guild will not interfere in Takumi's affairs at all. And if Takumi wants exactly that, he will never set foot in this place again. Takumi assesses the balance of power in the team, Jasre, Leia, and Chiharu nearby, but he admits besides them he has only one more ally. But Barbara calms him down. Don't worry about the numbers. If Takumi is confident, he can even fight alone. But then Maix bursts in with a crazy idea. She suggests bringing 3 more Heavenly Kings to join the squad. And hearing that he will have reinforcements, Takumi relaxedly leaned back on his stone and coolly accepted the challenge. Barbara confirms with a smile that the deal is made, telling them that later she will send the list of guild representatives. He glanced at Takumi, who was sitting on his stone, and noticed that the guy looked quite calm despite everything. Barbara admits that if Takumi really wanted, he would probably have dealt with everyone effortlessly. But he freezes, not leaving, to add one last condition. Clenching his fists, he warned him not to underestimate the guild and directly addressed him, Takumi, the Demon King. With a chilling, piercing look, Barbara makes it clear that they still have a hidden ace up their sleeve. Takumi keeps a poker face and coldly tells the leader that he looks forward to seeing it. And as soon as they leave, Takumi sits and replays the conversation in his head, realizing that he just agreed to a big fight. He instantly decides that his main plan is to surrender in the first round and run away because he saw in Barbara Roy's eyes a deadly serious intention to kill him. He got so scared that suddenly a random waterfall appeared to hide the fact that he wet his pants. Finally, the day of the great tournament has come, and the city under the bright sky looks huge. At the guild headquarters, everything is ready. The main event is about to start, so giant banners unfold in the hall, and the host loudly announces, the drawing of the main tournament bracket starts right now. He tells everyone in the crowd, get ready, there will be a big opening. The full list comes out and there are insane battles. Chairman Barbaroi, Takumi in first place, Alice and all the monster kings like Mayekis and Chloe. Takumi looks at the board and feels a sudden vibe of battle manga. He definitely knows that if he started fighting, he would die in 2 seconds so. He makes a very tense face and silently swears that under any circumstances, he will definitely surrender. Later Takumi walks through the market, and some guys whisper that they saw the Demon Lord's squad, but one of them panics and shouts to his friend, don't look him in the eyes, or else you will literally be cursed to death. Takumi is indifferent to the scary rumors about him, and Mayaki just appears behind him and, as if nothing happened, asks for cotton candy. Takumi tries to brush off Mayaki, apologizing, sorry, I'll buy you cotton candy on the way home. Inside him, panic begins to rise. He realizes that literally 4 heavenly kings are following him, and this makes him feel like a true demon king. He stares into the void, seriously wondering if he will ever be able to become an ordinary guy again when all this mess is over. He looks at the huge stadium and thinks to himself, I've never fought on such a magnificent stage before. But suddenly a priestess appears with paper talismans in her hands and tells him that this is the work of the 4 divine pillars, the same as those in the east. She explains that the 4 divine beasts Genbu, Bayako, Suryu, and Suzaku guard the 4 directions to turn the arena into a sacred place. She breaks down the mechanics. Her magic is in the pillars, so Genbu blocks deadly strikes, Bayako catches cheaters, Suryu heals wounds, and Suzaku brings the dead back to life. She clearly says, if even one of these safeguards activates, it is a defeat for the fighter, but the main thing is that no one will die in this arena. Takumi immediately looks relieved and says that this is great news. Now he can fight with complete peace of mind, knowing he won't be killed. But the priestess completely misunderstood him. She gasped and assumed that he was just nervous because his crazy power could accidentally kill an opponent. Takumi decides to go along with the priestess's misunderstanding. He smiles and says she understood everything perfectly, although he himself knows very well that she is completely wrong. Suddenly Linden appears in a maid uniform, politely bows, and tells Lord Takumi that he has been waiting for him, and she leads everyone to the bench designated for the Demon King's army, and Takumi is sweating nervously. This sign is clearly wrong too. On the huge screen, the female host gets excited and shouts into the microphone that the main event of the Great Martial Tournament officially begins. Then they show a clip of a hand drawing a numbered ball from a box, just to prove that the matchmaking lottery was strict and fair. The host dramatically raised her hand and loudly addressed the entire stadium. Look at the big screen, the final tournament bracket is shown there. The table reveals the entire list of fights in there, clearly visible. Takumi will fight the leader Barbara Saza in the very first match of the day. One day Takumi's sword suddenly spoke and frankly declared that this so-called random lottery smells like a complete rigging. But Takumi just shrugged and said that whoever his opponent is, it doesn't matter, because he knows there is no one on that list he could actually defeat. The crowd erupts as the announcer shouts that there will be no wasting time, and the first match of the first round is starting right now. The female announcer loudly calls for Leader Barbaro and Lord Takumi to enter the arena, and Barbara giggles to herself and says that finally the time has come to begin. Takumi remembers what Nuru Hatchi told him. This is the one she hates, fighting the most he resorts to all dirty tricks to catch people off guard. Rumor has it that he deliberately pretends to be weak and hides his presence to give enemies a false sense of security. Takumi understands, if the opponent pretends to be weak, then that's even better, because he himself is truly weak. In the stands, Leia shouts to him, "Don't use your special move, yet I'll easily deal with those who remain in the tournament." Despite the noise, Takumi turns to the head and asks, "Can we clarify one thing before the fight?" He looks him straight in the eyes and asks if it was Barbaroi who suspected him of being the Demon King. But he received no answer. The announcer immediately shouted for the first match to begin. And Barbaroi doesn't waste a minute. He instantly lunges at Takumi with a powerful, unexpected strike, even before he can react. Leia shouts his name from the stands, and Takumi instantly realizes dodging this attack is impossible. And then the blow hits with tremendous force, the arena floor crumbles, debris flies everywhere. But Barbaroi didn't hit him, he pressed Takumi to the ground and unleashed a secret sealing art called the Circle of Dark Drain. Cara shouts from the sword that this is actually dark magic, and exclaims that such a technique cannot be used without preparation, but Barbaroi is breathing heavily, sweating, looking completely exhausted, and tells Takumi that it's finally over. Dark tentacles begin to wrap around Takumi's body, and Barbaroi explains that postponing their fight for a month was part of the plan. And forcing Takumi to participate in this grand tournament also turned out to be just a trap. He admits everything he did was only to create conditions for applying this very technique. So he spent the whole month secretly, weaving ritual magic into the floor of the arena. And he has just given the last drop of his power to finally activate it. Takumi starts sweating and asks if setting a trap long before the match is a pure foul, but Barbaroi insists it's just a loophole. He added it after the arena was built, so everything is fair, and he looks straight at him with a burning gaze and says it doesn't matter how much insane power Takumi restrains because that magic circle is created to suck out every drop of energy until nothing remains at all. Takumi is not even afraid, he just feels that it exactly resembles Karna's ability to drain power. And he suddenly realizes, if it affects the whole area, then in fact it is a better version of the power of his own sword. Barbaroi laughs uproariously and shouts, "Time to drop the curtain," then turns to Takumi, "Wither and die." But Takumi calmly tears the dark tentacles from his body, and Barbaroi stands there, unable to believe his eyes. The head constantly boasts that his technique can catch even gods, and with a light smile says, "Sorry that I am too strong." But Takumi says that it is disgusting and ridiculous. The attack only works on the strong, and his strength is literally zero. Barbaroi completely loses his head. He looks at Takumi with pure horror and shouts, "Who are you really, damn it?" He points at him with a trembling finger and asks if he is some kind of monster Takumi, who surpasses both gods and demon kings. Cara whispers from the sword, when no one is looking, pushing Takun, "Just say your usual cool phrase to finish everything." So Takumi crosses his arms, with a confident smile, and looking at Barbaroi, says that he figured everything out and played the role like a true pro. Just like that, Barbaroi falls, and the commentator shouts that the winner of the first round is the strongest in the universe, Takumi. Takumi waves to the crowd, and the announcer shouts that he knocked down the head Barbaroi and didn't even sweat. But the crowd is confused. One guy says that even with his special eyes he saw nothing, and the fight ended instantly. They start inventing wild theories, whether Takumi has a circle of instant death or he controls the very air. In reality, it was just a massive self-destruction, but Chiharu doesn't care. She attacks him, shouting how cool he is, and Leia hugged him tightly and exclaimed that it was wonderful, and Chloe picked up, boasting that this is exactly what she expects from her fiancé. Mikey moved closer with a smile and asked the Demon King if he was recruiting brides, saying that she also wanted to join the squad. Leia and Chloe instantly exploded, both shouted at her simultaneously, insisting that they definitely would not take her with them. The crowd watches the drama unfold, and a few guys, jealous because of the harem, shout that they will never forgive him for this. The announcer bursts in sharply to avoid wasting time, loudly shouting that the second match of the first round is starting right now, so. She loudly calls out the names Linden Lindbergh and Dogma and asks them to come out to the arena. Dogma is a huge armored giant, and he tells everyone to calm down because he is practically immortal even without a protective barrier. He boasts that no mere mortal can cause him the slightest harm at all. He looks down on Linden and sternly warns her, if you plan to throw the match, this is the only chance you will get. He adds that he is not kind enough to spare anyone once the fight begins, but Linden is not scared at all. She simply adjusts her clothes, bows, and like a true maid, wishes him a good day. Linden Kumlai says goodbye, and at that very moment the space behind her literally shatters into pieces. Mikey and Takumi looked completely stunned, and Mikey explained that the guy was just erased by spatial teleportation. She calls Dogma an idiot. He never defends himself because he usually ignores harm, but she is still shocked that he couldn't handle that magic. Takumi started sweating, asking himself, did Dogma really lose just because he was weak to magic, or if Linden is actually much stronger than they thought, and spatial magic is no joke at all? The commentator shouts that since Dogma is now technically absent, Linden Lindbergh wins by default. Maik returns, muttering that Dogma is a disgrace to the four heavenly kings, so she will have to save their reputation herself. The announcer calls to start the third fight of the first round, and on Meiki's face is a scared, serious expression. Maix and Dagon are called to the arena, and Dagon comes out looking ready to fight, but then And now we jump to the fourth match. Azathoth, the Dark King, completely destroyed Maskine and won. The host after the last match just lost it, shouting about how strong the demon army is, and asking if humans even have a chance against these monsters. Takumi sits in the stands and is sweating. He thinks that even though they are formally allies, that fight was too brutal, and he is horrified at the thought of what will happen if they find out he is not who he pretends to be. He turns to Mayaki sitting next to him, becomes serious for a moment, and asks her if it is really impossible for demons and humans to just live together in peace. Maik instantly rejects this idea, telling him it is unrealistic. The weak will always fear the strong, and the strong will always trample the weak, and this breeds an endless cycle of fights that will never end. She throws him a piercing look and says that her clan simply does not follow those who are weak. So imagining a future where they live peacefully with humans means drowning in contradictions. Immediately after that heavy conversation, the scoreboard lit up the third match of the first round, Beast King Mayaki's versus Super Hunter Dagon. The match started and ended in an instant. Other adventurers in the crowd were in complete shock, stammering that someone like Dagon just received a completely crushed. It was a total one-sided rout. Dagon was instantly crushed, and Mayaki's takes the victory. Mayaki's fervently repeats that their king must be the weakest person, the one who feels everyone's pain. But she says there is a catch: that same weak person must turn out to be stronger than all of them. She looks him straight in the eyes and says, such a person simply does not exist in this world. And Takumi begins to sweat, thinking that he would definitely win if it were just a competition of who is weaker. Mayaki's asks if he has forgotten that he long ago abandoned that dream of peace, but then she tells Demon King Takumi that as soon as this tournament ends, the four of them must head to the borderlands. Here, Takumi panics and tries to stop her. This is too much information at once. Suddenly he realizes that first Demon King actually wanted to live in peace with humans back then. The announcer suddenly interrupts the moment, loudly shouting that it is time to start the fifth match of the first round. She calls Leia and Yora immediately to the arena. The next fight is starting. Leia turns around, smiles confidently, and tells Takumi to watch her carefully. Takumi starts sweating heavily but pretends to be cool and tells her, go out there and give it your all, and I will watch from the stands. But as soon as she leaves, he notices a mysterious letter hidden in his pocket, and he opens it and reads a chilling message. I have not forgotten you. Meet under the big tree behind the arena. Takumi quickly comes up with a classic excuse. He tells Chiharu that he just needs to go to the bathroom for a moment. But she is terribly worried about him, so he raises his hand and promises her that he will return soon. He goes outside to the meeting place, and from behind the tree, a voice says that they always knew he was the Demon King. The shadow slowly asks what to call him now, whether the title Demon King fits, or if he wants something else, and then Then the voice adds, if he doesn't mind, they can just leave everything as it was. Linden comes out with a sharp look and says to him, just call me Linden Lindbergh. Takumi immediately gets to the point, sweating a little, and asks Linden what exactly she wants from him. She completely ignores his question and starts talking about flowers, saying that blue roses did not exist before. Linden explains that, because they never truly existed, the language of their flowers once meant only one word, impossible. But she says that has changed. When the first blue rose finally appeared in this world, a new meaning appeared with it. She extends her hand and says that since the flower accomplished the impossible, its meaning has transformed into something else. She poses dramatically and declares that the blue rose now means the fulfillment of dreams. Really? Takumi rubs his eyes, completely puzzled by this hour of poetry, and asks her once again what exactly she wants him to do. Linden smiles and this time answers directly. She says she doesn't want him to do anything at all. He asks if she really wants him to just keep pretending to be the Demon King forever. But she immediately corrects him. Right, but you'll have to play not only the Demon King. Linden listed all his crazy titles, such as the strongest in the universe, and told him that she wanted him to remain the Demon King forever. Takumi looks completely confused and asks her why she needs such a thing, but she just looks at him and says it's a secret she'll tell only if he can truly defeat her in battle. Takumi squinted and immediately replied to her, no. He says he'll concede in the second round, but will still declare to everyone that he is the Demon King. Linden says that's a pity, but then she steps right into his personal space and she suddenly grabbed his face and kissed him right on the lips before he could react. She steps back, waving her hand, and tells him that it was a special kiss so that he keeps quiet. Takumi freezes and blushes, panicking as he realizes his first kiss was stolen by the true Demon King. At that moment, Leia runs up all beaten up, but joyfully exclaims that she won and finally overcame her past. Takumi forces himself to smile, sweating heavily, and tells Leia that she did wonderfully there. Leia got emotional and frankly admitted that the old her would have given up long ago, but the thought that Takumi had her back gave her the strength to break through. So, Takumi nervously agreed that it was cool, and in his thoughts apologized he definitely hadn't looked, because he was busy with the fact that his first kiss had been stolen. At that very moment, the tournament moved on the announcer, loudly shouted that the sixth match of the first round was starting right now. The big screen flashed, showing the confrontation Rick versus Enda, and they were called to the arena. In the corridor, Leia notices that Takumi looks completely exhausted, asks if everything is okay, and thinks that he is just worn out after cheering so wildly for her. Takumi openly ignores the question and simply asks Leia directly if she has ever kissed anyone, which makes Leia completely lose her head. She blushes to her ears and, stunned, stammers the word kiss. She starts flusteredly waving it off, denying that she ever did such a thing, and then nervously suggests that Takumi, of course, must have experience in this. But Takumi just sits, looks at the floor, and mumbles that no, he had no experience, only literally just now. Takumi's confession hit them like thunder. Leia and Chloe just froze with blank faces, and the air became incredibly heavy. And they instantly flare up. Leia demands to know if he just kissed someone, and Chloe says she wants to hear that too. They loom over him with terrible faces and say that he will now reveal every little detail of what happened. The chaos grew so much that the narrator couldn't stand it and asked, why is the fiercest battle raging outside the arena and not inside? The crowd felt the girls' furious anger, but they were mistaken and took it for Takumi's strength. They trembled with fear and praised the aura of the Demon King. Suddenly Chloe sniffs the air and exclaims that she finally knows exactly who this mysterious person is. She even shouts, this smell is the same as the one the woman next to the Demon King had, and at that moment Linden appears right behind their backs. Linden tosses his hair, teases them with a slight smile, and asks why they caused such a commotion over a simple kiss. Takumi asks in a trembling voice why Linden is loitering near their bench, but she ignores him, and the situation gets much worse because Leia and Chloe decided that they also want kisses, and even the sword started shouting that it wants to join the action too. Suddenly Chiharu steps forward and calls Takumi, and before he can understand what is happening, she grabs him and simply kisses him on the face. She holds his cheeks, he blushes deeply. She smiles and says it's okay because she will never let him go again. Takumi was so stunned that he just let out an embarrassed groan. And while all the fuss continues, the tournament announcer suddenly declares, the sixth match somehow ended in a double technical defeat before anyone even noticed. Suddenly Chloe bursts into the fight, shouting her evil dragon dark big fiery fireball attacks so. And suddenly a huge double explosion from two dragons thundered through the arena, shaking the ground. Takumi looks at the destruction and admits to himself that although the fight is incredible, he definitely cannot compete with such power. Monsters are flying everywhere, chaos reigns all around, and he decides, whoever wins this fight, he will definitely skip his turn. At that very moment, Meiki moves closer and casually throws the Demon King, but Takumi immediately tries to deflect that title. Meiki approaches closely, looks seriously, and demands to know who he really is, and she sharply told him that the aura the girl released earlier was definitely from the Demon King. Takumi begins to panic, thinking that his cover is blown, and he will soon be taken down like a character from a mafia movie. He, with a trembling voice, nervously asks her what she is going to do if it turns out he is not the Demon King, but she just scratched her head and said she would do nothing because it seems the real Demon King needs him right now. She decides to pretend she saw nothing, and Takumi is left amazed. How can she be so relaxed? Meiki says that the Heavenly Kings might attack humanity again later, but everything will be decided by the order of the Demon King. Meanwhile, the host disqualifies Chloe for cheating, and she just clicks her tongue, standing there exposed. Karna's sword bitterly realizes that it also messed up. It admits that it was caught during the fight when it was transferring Chloe's power. The announcer tries to keep up the pace and lead everyone to the 8th fight between Alice and Jasre, but everything turns into chaos. The announcer shouts that Jasre forfeited the match, so Alice automatically wins. And Takumi completely froze, realizing that the entire first round flew by too quickly. He starts sweating profusely, wondering, could the real Alice really be participating in this tournament? But reality hits him right in the heart. The second round is ahead, he has to fight Linden, and he is terrified. The announcer doesn't give him a minute to rest, immediately announces the start of the second match. Takumi steps out, visibly nervous, and Linden steps forward. A huge, terrifying aura swirls around her. She adjusts her glasses on her nose, smiles eerily, and says that it's finally time to start. And she tore the dark power from herself, firmly told him that she no longer hides it, and sharply asked why the Demon King is doing this. She demanded to know why he forced her to acknowledge him as the Demon King, even going so far as to kiss her. Takumi realized he was doomed, grabbed the bell, and desperately begged Nuru Hatchi to come and save him right now. The bell rang instantly, the space before them warped, and Nuru Hatchi suddenly jumped out as if from thin air. She immediately threw herself in front of Takumi, shielded him with her body, and shouted that she would never let him go again. Chloe and Karna stand aside, completely bewildered. The arena's protective barrier didn't even react to this uninvited guest. Takumi froze, looking at the bell in his hand, and realized that the tournament judges probably consider summoning a person equivalent to drawing a weapon. Linden is not embarrassed at all. She adjusts her glasses with a smirk and says that this time it seems they are not destined to be alone. Nuru Hatchi firmly stands her ground and tells the secretary that she is sorry, but she will not give Takumi to anyone. She becomes completely serious and asks Linden one last time if she intends to retreat and leave Takumi alone. Linden closes her eyes and, surprisingly, tells Nuru Hatchi that she is grateful to her, confessing that without that flower she would have long since broken down. She says everything would have been fine if Alice had been saved, then she wouldn't have done anything bad. Even if it was just Nuru Hatchi, everything would have been okay, but she glanced sharply at Takumi and blurted out the truth. That man left them both just to go and live quietly alone in the mountains. Nuru Hatchi instantly starts to object, begins saying something about Takumi, but Linden cuts her off, says she already knows everything. She knows that Nuru Hatchi arranged this whole plan and even set up the barrier on that mountain just to watch over him. She says that Nuru Hatchi threw away everything, Alice, Linden herself, and even her dreams, just for this. Takumi stands completely stunned, realizing that his expulsion from the party back then was actually Nuru Hatchi's plan, and she didn't disappear, she was watching him all this time. Linden asks if truly giving everything for the happiness of this boy makes Nuru Hatchi happy, causing Nuru Hatchi to shout at her to shut up. The talks are over. Nuru Hatchi unleashes a colossal attack called Wave Sphere of Purgatory, so Linden instantly counterattacks with her dark magic, a prison of subspace. Two explosions collide with insane force. Now, it's a full, merciless confrontation between Nuru Hatchi and Linden. Linden shouts through the magical storm that she always watched. She entrusted her dream to Alice and Nuru Hatchi and just wanted to guard the dungeon. And she shouts that she really thought that would be enough for her. She shouts why, after 10 years looking at both of them, has there been no progress. She looks confusedly at the barrier and asks Linden what exactly she is doing here. Linden says she will take him if he is not needed. The blast wave knocks Takumi away. Nuru Hatchi immediately denies this and shouts that she really needs Takumi, but Linden only smiles and asks, What does this mean? Is she just pretending to be his guardian? Or maybe she is content just to stand aside and watch while someone else takes him. Nuru Hatchi immediately bursts out on the spot and shouts that she is completely wrong, Her cheeks instantly flush red, and she loudly exclaims that she actually loves Takumi. Linden adjusts his glasses and says that he can say it. After all, now they can finally begin. The entire arena trembled from the sudden surge of energy, and Takumi just stood there, puzzled. Linden stands with his back to them and says that they are about to exactly recreate what happened 10 years ago. And Nuru Hatchi freezes in fear while Linden tells her that starting right now, she takes everything she has. Dark magic explodes around Linden, swirling up into the air. Everyone watches, and then she raises her eyes, adjusts her glasses with a crooked smile, and asks if it has finally come. A huge dragon crashes down from the sky with a roar, slams into the arena, and raises a giant cloud of dust. Chloe loses her head and shouts that it is her grandfather, and Leia yells that it is an ancient dragon. Takumi Tremtiachki raised his head, saw a figure of a dragon on his back, and suddenly understood who it was. Linden watches their landing, and with a smile proclaims that now finally every actor is on stage. The rider jumps off the dragon and lands amid the debris, making a spectacular entrance. And Takumi is frightened when the newcomer notices that her student became the strongest in humanity even before she found out about it. The story briefly summarizes the main problem. Takumi is a master without any talent, but somehow everyone mistakenly considers him the strongest guy in the universe. And that is why Alice finally appeared. She stands and smiles as if she has done something great, while birds peacefully soar over distant mountains, the morning is filled with quiet calm. Morning, Takumi sits on the porch with a cup of tea, sighs deeply with relief, and tells himself that his peaceful everyday life has finally returned. But then he freezes and admits, in fact, it hasn't quite returned, yet he just decided to pretend that it has. He looks at the landscape and thinks, even if it's just for show, it's not so bad now because Nuru Hatchi blushes nearby. Leia smiles, and a voiceover confirms, Nuru Hatchi has definitely fallen in love with Takumi. Alice, on the other hand, looks completely exhausted. The days between Leia's arrival and the end of the tournament were too harsh for her. Takumi closed his eyes and clasped his hands together, fervently praying never to be dragged into such trouble again. But suddenly someone bursts in with mesh marks on their face. They say they just came to say hello and ask if they get points for that too. Linden intervenes with a stone face and explains that now just to say hello to him, it costs 5 Takumi points. Chloe is clearly irritated by the sudden paywall and asks how many points she currently has. Linden checks the current score and tells her she has exactly 4 Takumi points. This drives Chloe crazy. She has barely made any progress and asks if pulling all those weeds in front of the cave was really worth only 2 points. Linden confirms this, explaining that rates vary depending on the area, and she gets only 1 point for every 25 meters she clears. Takumi listens and thinks this system is pure fraud, but tells himself he needs such high barriers because otherwise he would never be able to relax. Chloe decides to check her long-term goal and directly asks Linden, how many points does she need to actually marry Takumi? Linden doesn't even hesitate and throws out a number. The cost of marriage is over 5,600,000,000 points. Chloe shouts that even if she weeded the entire planet, she wouldn't earn that much, and Linden adds that having children after marriage costs another $10 billion. Takumi simply lost his mind over that last part. He can't believe the point system still exists even after they got married. Linden confirms that the prices are exactly as stated without any exceptions, and Takumi listens, feeling genuine relief. With such astronomical amounts, he realizes that he might be able to live in peace until the end of his days, because no one can afford to bother him. While Takumi hides in the bushes and wonders whether to thank Alice for coming up with this scam, Chloe looks for a workaround. She asks Linden if she can instead earn points by doing useful things for Takumi, and she immediately becomes impatient and asks if there is a way to just earn a big pile of points at once. Linden explains that for ordinary tasks, the maximum is only 100 points, but hints the system has another side. She reveals that there is a hidden challenge that immediately gives Takumi 10 billion points and asks if Chloe wants to try. Chloe doesn't even think twice. She is wildly happy and exclaims that, of course, she will do it if such an option exists. Linden nods, takes out a communication device, and without wasting time, says she will immediately contact Lady Alice to set everything up. She officially reads out the quest details. The hidden challenge is to defeat the strongest person, tells Chloe that all she needs to do is beat Alice within 60 minutes and get 10 billion points, and Chloe instantly freezes. The dragon girl instantly realizes that she has no chance against the Sword Saint, so she takes off into the sky at full speed, shouting that today they will be spared. When the threat disappeared, Takumi returned to Leia as if nothing had happened and said that it was probably time to go gather rice. Takumi asks about work on the farm, and Leia replies that she finished the harvest this morning. Meiki helped her mow everything down. We see the cat girl putting all her effort into working in the field. She earned 3 points for Takumi, but these points go directly to the Demon King's account. Takumi becomes serious for a moment and mutters Meiki's, Demon King and Grand Tournament, as if trying to connect the dots. The scene shifts to the arena entrance. Linden stands majestically blocking the way for Takumi, Leia, and Mayaki. Linden admits that winning a one-on-one duel is impossible, but she smiles and announces that the team battle against Alice starts right now. She takes a stance and shouts loudly to begin, and Alice accumulates a huge energy ball. The narrator says that this moment became the beginning of the legendary Great War of Alice. The attack hits instantly. The explosion destroys the guild headquarters and turns everything within a 2-kilometer radius into a burnt wasteland. There is complete chaos in the stands. All the spectators' clothes are burned off, and everyone ends up with a giant afro. When the smoke finally clears, Takumi curls up in a hole in the wall and quietly calls Leia. Takumi casually sips a drink and asks what Alice has been up to lately, and Leia smiles and says she went to training. She says that seeing Takumi at the tournament, Alice realized she is still too weak, and Takumi has no idea why she thinks so. Leia seriously explains that Alice created Takumi's point system to keep people away until she becomes strong enough, but Takumi just abruptly interrupts. He looks completely confident now, but in reality, he has no idea what will happen next. The narrator says that in just a month, someone appeared who really scored 10 billion points. Cara completely loses her head when she hears this number and screams about those 10 billion points. She instantly snapped at Leia, shut up, and called her a black lizard because she was afraid Takumi would hear them. Takumi is sitting right there sweating. He clearly heard every word of that loud conversation. Cara is constantly panicking and asking who could have scored so many points if her group barely scraped together 25. Leia also starts sweating from panic and admits that she is far behind. She has only 300 points. Leia looked at her device and admitted, although this usually doesn't happen, she definitely received a message from Alice. So Cara instantly demands to be told who it is. She is curious if someone really managed to overcome the hidden challenge. Leia shouts that it's impossible. Alice would never lose to anyone except Takumi, and because of this Takumi was nervously sweating because he knew for sure he also couldn't beat her. He is a complete fake. But what surprises him the most is, how could someone possibly earn 10 billion points in such a short time? Leia says that the mysterious guest will come to the hut today because it is the only place where points can be exchanged. Cara almost loses her head. What kind of prize is this? She shouts about marriage and regrets not having accumulated her points. But suddenly both girls stop arguing and look into the distance. What they see completely shocks them. Takumi also sees it and understands it makes sense. If you do this, scoring 10 billion points is really possible. Turns out the guest did not come alone. A whole royal army is climbing the path along with a huge carriage. The chariot approached, soldiers marched nearby, and they noticed a flag fluttering in the wind. It definitely belonged to the kingdom of Lucia. Takumi finally understood how they managed to score those 10 billion points. They literally mobilized the entire country to do it. He recalls that Lucia has about 50 million people, so he starts counting in his head. If every person saves just a little each month, the numbers add up, and he realizes that this crazy plan can really work. Cara spotted who it was, shouted to Leia, who, completely stunned, burst out shouting that it was the princess of the cliff. And as if on command, the carriage completely stops, the doors slowly creak and open. A shadow emerges inside. The group, holding their breath, watches tensely from afar. Even Takumi had already heard rumors about this lady. They say there is a princess in the kingdom of Lucia. She is almost 30, but she still refuses everyone who proposes to her. People call her the Princess of the Cliff, a nickname that won't let go. But this is not just a random name. Its name actually comes from white lilies that bloom only on the steepest, most dangerous cliffs. In the East, these flowers are called Yuri, a symbol of purity and dignity. It is said that the flower proudly blooms even in the harshest conditions, just like the woman who is stepping out of the carriage right now. Outside, the servant announces that they have arrived for Lady Salia, and from inside the carriage, she thanks Nanison for the hard work. The group was lurking in the tree crowns while the off-screen voice narrated her story. Supposedly, a whole bunch of men had proposed to her, but she refused them, 11 princes and supermodels. She comes out and looks completely unattainable for Evrionias, if a beautiful flower that has bloomed high on a cliff, where no one can reach, and that's it. And that is why all the boys she refused began to call her the Princess of the Cliff. Finally, she reveals her face. This is the real one Salia, Shona Lucia. Takumi froze in place, really recognized her. Salia was not just a princess, she had been his longtime comrade and had saved his life more than once in past years. She looks directly at him with a gentle smile and says that a lot of time has passed. Her butler Nanison intervenes to get things moving, explaining that Princess Salia came to exchange her Takumi points and wants to complete the paperwork immediately. Takumi was a little shaken, but agreed and said he would go and immediately check those spots. So the butler whispered of course and immediately extended the tray, first asking him to look at her T-card. Dvoretsky shows the card, and it's just ridiculous. Right on its front side is printed a serious face of Takumi, and Nanison presents it as the Takumi point card or simply the T-card, and with a smile admits that he came up with this idea himself. But he assures that's how it is. Everyone in the kingdom of Lucia has their own to manage Takumi points. Takumi is all in cold sweat and completely panics, asking Nanison when he even managed to do something like that. Nanison ignores the panic and notices Leia in the background. She is looking at the card with an expression of pure despair, so he calmly offers to give them one, explaining that T-cards are given to everyone who wants them, not just citizens. Both girls instantly lose their heads. Leia begs for 3 copies to keep one, and Chloe jumps up and shouts that she also needs 3. While they are in panic, Nanison adjusts his glasses and drops another bomb. The Takumi Winter Festival is currently underway in the kingdom. He says points can be exchanged for money, but if collected during this campaign, special rewards open up, which means Leia immediately got interested, grabbed him, and demanded to know exactly what special benefits she could get. Nanison lists the rewards: 10 points for goods, 200 for a year of meat, or only 300 for a gold coin. He says in amazement that 1 coin costs an entire house, so the number of points is simply huge. He recalls as much as 10 billion. He asks if she wants to exchange right now, because the card he just gave her is actually already charged with 10 billion points. Leia fiercely unfolds the scroll he hands her, and Nanison says that inside there is also a personal letter from Lady Eli's. In the background, Chloe is losing her mind. She's furious because the card has 10 billion points and Leia got it first. She starts shouting that she should have pulled Leia out earlier, while Nanison calmly takes notes nearby. Takumi leans toward Leia. She's staring so intently at the letter that he worries and asks if she is okay. He notices the name on the paper and instantly breaks into a sweat. They definitely deliberately wrote King of Goblins to mock him, and Leia lifts her gaze from the scroll. Her face serious, she confirms that the information in the letter is completely true. Salia smiles at them and throws the main question: what exactly are they going to exchange all those points for? Nanison starts a geography lesson, reminding them that there are 5 large countries on the continent, and he begins with the north and east. He points to the city of machines at the very south, then mentions the kingdom of magic settled in the west. And finally, he points to the center and explains that the largest of all countries is the United Nation, the very central world in which they live. Nanison adjusts his glasses and explains that now their kingdom of Lucia rules everything and stands at the very center of events. He adds that getting along with everyone, they actually managed to keep peace for over 100 years without a single major war. But then he delivers bad news. Now all countries from the north, south, east, and west are simultaneously trying to attack them. Takumi completely exploded and shouted, "Does he really mean that literally all countries are attacking us?" Nanison says that it all started a month ago because of the legend about Takumi. Rumors spread that he instantly killed the leader and scared the strongest living fighters. Takumi began to sweat and tried to defend himself, awkwardly mumbling that he literally just stood there and did nothing, but Nanison simply continues his story, saying that while Takumi is in the guild, the world thinks he is just a powerful recluse hiding in a cave. Nanison does not calm down. Rumors say that Takumi is not interested in the guild at all and does not want to rule any country. Takumi starts sweating because he knows it's true. He literally just wants to cook food and live a quiet, peaceful life. But Nanison says that is exactly the problem. Every nation thinks that as soon as they manage to capture Lord Takumi, then they will rule not only the country, they will be able to dominate the whole world. So everyone is panic-stricken trying to capture him. And Nanison says that all 4 nations are desperately collecting Takumi balls, and in some places they are already used as money. Leia says she wants some of that money, and Takumi panics completely, asking if he literally has now become money. Nanison warns him, if this continues, some other country will simply come and tear him away by force, so he explains that Lucia was the first to gather points to stop this. Salia intervenes and tells Takumi there is no choice left. She firmly grabbed his hand and began to say that he belongs to the kingdom of Lucia, or more precisely, a completely different one, and And suddenly Takumi seemed to catch a memory before his eyes, appeared her smiling face from the moment she had just been talking about laundry. Leia stands looking completely depressed and mutters that her heart is gloomier than the weather. And Celia just smiles, calls her closer, and tells Leia that she will teach her how to wash properly. Leia freezes, becomes tense and nervous, asking if she can really do something like that so. Celia reassured her, "It's all right, you are a girl, so you still need to know how to wash." While Leia begins to wash her face, Celia stands next to Takumi and says that Leia actually looks a bit like Alice. Takumi smiled and agreed, admitting that watching her work gives him a strange feeling of nostalgia, but Leia is too fierce, asking if the clothes will fit, and Celia shouts that she is just tearing them. Takumi just laughs, brushing it off, thinking that his quiet and peaceful everyday life has finally returned. But the narrator clearly makes it understood the huge problem with Takumi's glasses is not solved at all. The frame cuts to the flashback title card on it, in large letters, is written a few days ago. Suddenly Celia tenses up. She grabs Takumi by the hands, looks intently into his eyes, and orders him to become only hers. He doesn't even have time to react, and she is already pressing him to herself in a tight embrace right in front of everyone. Takumi begins to panic and asks if she is serious, but Celia whispers that they just need to pretend to be kissing and press together for a second. She quietly, almost in a whisper, drops a bombshell. Among her subordinates hides an enemy spy, and this completely shocks Takumi. Meanwhile, standing aside and watching this romantic scene, Chloe completely loses it and shouts that she is about to release her final dragon form. Leia reacts even worse. She mumbles that it seems like a fight with gods and tries to commit seppuku right on the spot, causing everyone to shout for her to stop. Returning to the main stage, Nanison strikingly takes a pose and loudly shouts the name of her move-sentence spring bazooka to catch the peeper. Turns out to be a ninja from the east with a camera, and while Nanison wants to chase him, Celia tells him, "Let him go." Celia explains, since they know who the spy is, they can figure out who hired him, but Nanison still asks if she really agrees with this. Takumi just watches all this unfold, completely puzzled, and asks if that guy really was the spy she was talking about. Celia glanced at the detained offender and waved it off. He is just one of many, probably just a petty spy. The soldiers standing behind began to panic. They were completely shocked that a spy was hiding right in their ranks. Takumi is still panicking because of that hug, but Celia tells him to calm down. She won't force him into marriage. She just needs rumors to spread that he belongs to her kingdom so that other countries will back off. Eventually, Celia gave up the idea of spending Takumi's accumulated points to force a wedding, instead. She mercilessly squanders 100 million points on Day passes to the dungeon, sends her entire army home, and leaves only herself on site. She returns to Takumi and says she will live with him for some time at least, until she tracks down the real mastermind behind this whole affair. Takumi looked puzzled and asked if she was hinting at someone's involvement, because he was sure that the Takumi point system was Alice's idea. Celia asks if he really believes that Alice is smart enough to build a complex anti-fraud system, and Takumi immediately agrees that girl can't even do simple math. Celia noted how suspicious it was that Alice suddenly joined the tournament after a long period of hiding, and asked if he sensed any trickery, but Takumi honestly admitted he suspected nothing at all. She suddenly becomes very serious and warns him. This plan started long before the tournament, and someone is definitely using both him and Alice in a large-scale conspiracy. Takumi looks completely broken from all this pressure. He asks what kind of trouble he has been dragged into again, and says he just wants to end it right now. Celia pays no attention to the mood in the room and unpacks her suitcases, notices that her bed definitely won't fit there, and then suddenly realizes she forgot her toothbrush, and she says so cheerfully that she will have to ask Nanison to send it later, as if it's not a problem at all. Chloe watches her from the side and asks if that woman is seriously humming some melody right now, and Leia seems like she can no longer tolerate the new guest, confirming that she hears the buzzing loudly and clearly. Celia cheerfully wonders where she will spend the night today, and Leia shouts from behind that she has drawn a hard line. Celia better not cross it. Takumi decides to ask a serious question. Is her country really okay without the princess? She simply says that everything is fine because she left a replacement. I, feeling out of place, freeze and ask what she means by replacement. Finally, they showed who is covering her. It's the new Lucia Hashidal Chilt. And the text reveals a shocking truth. She is actually the first queen of the kingdom of Lucia. The scene begins with a memory where the witch says, "We need to take more people into the team." And suddenly the story goes back 10 years to tell how this whole mess started. Takumi explains that Nuru Hatchi, although he was first rank, got a promotion in the guild, but no one wanted to take into the team someone who was expelled. He says that usually ranks stop at E, but he was so bad that they invented a separate rank F at the bottom for him. He understood no one would ever take such a useless boy into their team, so from the very beginning he found himself in complete despair. But Nuru Hatchi rushed to save him, casually took on a quest of the highest, AAA difficulty, and declared that she herself would join his party. After she defeated the huge dragon, she muttered that he was much weaker than she had thought, and realized he could not be protected alone. Returning to the present, Takumi asks the new Lucia why Nuru Hatchi even came to Lucia's royal castle. She pays no attention to the details and simply moves on, urging him, faster, and asks what happened. Takumi froze in place, pointed at the painting on the wall, and said that it was definitely a portrait of Nuru Hatchi. Takumi looks at the portrait on the wall. The inscription beneath it calls her the queen of the first generation, new Lucia Chilt. He addresses the current queen and asks if that woman was really the first ruler of this country, so the new. Lucia corrects him with a self-satisfied smile and says that essentially the first queen destroyed the real kingdom of Lucia and simply took it over. The scene shifts to a memory where someone solemnly pronounces her full royal name, but Nuru Hatchi instantly interrupts them and tells the one bowing on the floor to just call her Nuru Hatchi. She can't stand formality. In the throne room, the then queen agrees to renounce her titles and asks what business you have come here for today. And Nuru Hatchi smiles widely and says that she came to look for group members, precisely those who are excellent at defending, healing, and noticing crisis situations. The queen looks embarrassed and says that someone as powerful as Nuru Hatchi should not need such help, but returning to the present, Takumi realizes the truth. Those roles were not needed by her herself, they were needed to protect him. Before us is Captain Knight Rick, alongside healer Sasha, clear proof that she went all out to gather the best in the kingdom for Takumi. Nuru Hatchi loudly names exactly those people she wants, starting with Priestess Sasha, and she even demands that giant thief bats join the ranks. So she turns to the queen and double-checks their stats. She needs to know if they specialize in defense, recovery, and danger detection, and whether a trial run is needed. The queen gives the go-ahead, and Nuru Hatchi instantly decides, I am taking these three with me. Returning to the present, Sasha smiles and says that it brings back memories. It turns out, after all that chaos, she was sent to a monastery. Then Takumi listens to her story and sincerely admits that back then he didn't even suspect Sasha was actually the queen's daughter. But suddenly he notices that someone is missing from the group and asks where Rick is. He thinks that he should appear any moment. Celia's expression falls, and she tells him that Rick will not come. Actually, he can't, because he has been missing since the tournament ended, and Takumi is frozen in shock. She explains that she had long kept Rick on a special secret mission. His task was to watch Takumi and Alice and notice if anyone suspicious approached them. But now the one who was supposed to watch simply vanished into thin air. Hearing about Rick's disappearance, Takumi becomes serious and sincerely asks if he can help in any way. Celia just smiles in response and tells him that everything is fine, he just needs to stand here and flirt with her. She explains if rumors spread that she is marrying Takumi, the one who planned all this will definitely appear to see it with their own eyes. Takumi instantly notices a huge problem. From his ally Leia emanates a real murderous intent, so he starts to break out in sweat, thinking that even as an adventurer, he has never dealt with such a complicated quest before. Later, a giant roasted chicken stuffed entirely with steaming rice appears on the table. Leia stands over the plate in complete shock and asks what it is, pointing out that the bird is stuffed with rice. So Celia laughs, saying it reminds her of the days of adventure. Takumi always did this for her after the great quest. Leia's mood instantly darkened, and she muttered that he definitely didn't prepare anything special when she arrived. Takumi panics and feverishly explains, that's not true, back then the rice just wasn't ready to be harvested yet. Leia refuses to lose to nostalgic chatter and loudly insists that Takumi was insanely popular even in her time with him. Later that night in the bedroom, Leia looked at the arranged sleeping places and complained that her spot was noticeably farther from Takumi than yesterday. She blames Celia for staring closely at Takumi's sleeping face last night and firmly says she will no longer allow such closeness. Celia is not worried at all and sharply replies, asking what she's even talking about, since it was Leia who was staring at him closely. She noted with a self-satisfied smile that whoever was nearby Takumi was definitely sleeping the whole time, turned toward her side. Leia instantly came up with a desperate excuse, as if Takumi has a habit of showing the back of his head to those he truly loves. Takumi panics inside, not believing that he could have such a strange habit in his sleep. The girls press their faces against each other and argue about boundaries. Celia says not to cross the line, and Leia shouts that Celia is stealing an extra 2 cm. Celia sharply cut in that Leia needs to stop acting foolish because in reality, she is the closer one so. She suggests switching places if there are really so many complaints. Leia instantly refuses, saying it is her duty to protect Takumi from uninvited guests right here. The girls instantly panic. The beds are now even farther apart from each other. Leia complains that he is so mean, but Takumi cuts her off, rudely saying that this distance is their punishment for having quarreled. Later that night, Takumi sits up in bed, completely sleepless. He just cannot fall asleep so he goes outside, remembering how Leia and others filled his apartment before the point system appeared. Not only they, Rick and even the hero End himself hung out at his house a month before the tournament. He misses those days, but he has to guess who was pulling the strings and what they were really planning. He is thinking about Takumi's points and about the missing Riku. Sasha warned him that someone is using Alice and that. And this leads directly to the very system itself. He looked inside, but the entire mechanism was incredibly complex and gigantic. Sasha said it was just magic, but he knows better. Real spy devices are hidden behind the spells. This is clearly not the work of one person, as if entire nations gathered together to create this crazy city. He understood this ultramodern surveillance was definitely from South City, where science is far ahead. Looking back at the past month, he suddenly realizes those Takumi points were actually protecting him. He did not feel a drop of evil from the one who created the system. Honestly, it did not seem evil at all. Somehow he was overcome by nostalgia, but suddenly some sound rang nearby. From the shadow emerges a creepy guy with a bowl haircut together with mascara and indifferently says, "Good evening." He calls himself Dr. Deus and with a smile says that he broke the secret password just to come and test Takumi's strength. He grumbles that Mascara brought too little information from the tournament, so he had to come himself. Takumi froze in surprise and asked if he was really here to test him and what was the story with the password. Suddenly it dawns on him, the girl Mascara not only fought earlier, she was spying on him the whole time. Deus doesn't give him a second to think, orders Mascara to start the experiment right now. Mascara activates the combat system and announces that the extermination mode is launching and she is ready to enter the fight so. She pretends to faint, and Deus is wildly impressed that Takumi didn't even twitch. He thinks that he understood. It's just a trick to scare. Takumi turns around, trembling, but the reality is much sadder. He internally screams that he didn't move because he physically didn't have time to react. Deus doesn't stop analyzing him, says that Takumi obviously could destroy Mascara in an instant, but asks if he is holding back because he supposedly noticed that secret. Takumi is sweating profusely. A tense smile freezes on his face. He is sure that he definitely didn't destroy anything and honestly didn't notice anything at all. And then Deus drops a bomb and literally shows that Mascara is rigged with explosives enough to destroy the whole mountain, and Takumi just screams. He froze in place, paralyzed by shock, while the dust settled around, but Deus ignores the reaction and tells Mascara to aim seriously this time because he wants to see how the strongest moves. Machina replies coldly, "Yes, doctor," and immediately starts firing rapidly from the cannon on his arm. Takumi runs, escaping, but Deus completely misreads it in his files. He records that Takumi's weak aura is just a brilliant trick to relax the enemy. Takumi slipped behind a rock, and even the narrator says that his dodging skills are pathetic, literally E-level. He shouts with tears in his eyes that he is neither showing off nor holding back. He is simply truly weak, but Deus ignores the pleas and orders Mascara to blow up that rock with a rocket to test his defense. Mascara simply says, "Roger," and activates something called Grand Slaughter Mode, as if it's no big deal. Takumi realizes he is in big trouble and definitely cannot handle these guys alone, but just then, he sees a familiar chime in the air and hopes with anticipation that it means Nuru Hatchi is teleporting to save him. Deus immediately senses magic and smiles, wondering if the teleportation of the great sage can really break his system. Suddenly, an alarm lit up on the digital display, confirmation of the invasion, and Takumi suddenly froze. And the system right before his bewildered face suddenly launches intrusion protection protocols. The computer instantly reveals the essence of teleportation magic and immediately initiates reverse transfer to stop it. The system confirms that the invader has been eliminated, and Deus declares victory over Nuru Hatchi, which is why Takumi screams in panic, because Mascara instantly pulls out an anti-tank bazooka and starts a countdown from 5 to finish the job. She shouts fire and launches a rocket that causes a powerful explosion right where Takumi stands. Takumi touches himself and suddenly realizes somehow he is still alive, but then feels a hand on his head and looks up. Cara appears in human form with a wide smile and tells him that she made him wait because this completely drives Dr. Deus crazy. he shouts that it is impossible because his system did not register any call at all. He began muttering about action notes, wondering whether it was magic without spells or some higher-level jamming. And he shouts that this must be a lie. Even the god creator should not be able to bypass his security system. Takumi simply looks at the dragon girl and indifferently explains that he actually did not summon her. And he tells Deus the simple truth. She was with him, inside the sword, from the very beginning. Takumi simply calls Karna by name, and she stands there defending him and Dr. Deus completely loses it, shouting, "Attack you, me," demanding to know who he is and accusing him of being a creature that overturns all science. Karna slyly smiles and whispers to Takumi to just say his usual phrase, so. Takumi puts on a confident mask and calmly tells the doctor that he has figured everything out perfectly, confessing everything. Deus frantically checks his data and sees that she is a black dragoness with no record of previous contact, which makes this. He comes to a terrible conclusion. He shouts that this was not a summoning at all. Takumi must have created her from scratch. He yelled that Takumi instantly created the dragon and asks if the rumors are true that his father is a god creator. Takumi just quietly sighs to himself, thinking that his dad is just an ordinary man who runs a small hotel, but Deus decides there are no more options. Gritting his teeth, he orders Maskana to strike the dragon woman first. And Maskana instantly confirms the order, preparing to open fire with all its weapons. Maskana unleashes a huge barrage of energy explosions right at them, and Karna uses a dark absorption sphere, and she easily blocks it all. She smiles and asks, "Is that all?" and declares, "Time for punishment." Deus shouts that she is insolent, so Mashina lunges forward with a beam sword ready. Karna is not at all embarrassed and summons her evil, dragon dark giant sword. But Mashina feels she lacks strength, so she decides to unlock her limiter. Takumi sees a burst of energy and shouts in panic, "Karna." She smiles and says to Takumi, "Don't worry, I have to match their efforts." Mashina goes all out and launches her limit break, Ragnarok, so Karna immediately responds, drawing her heavy, sinister dragon shield. The clash between Karna and Mashina causes a huge explosion, and although it looks extremely powerful, as Takumi watches his land being destroyed, he complains that his property is being completely ruined right now. He shifts his attention to the scientist and tells Dr. Deus that staying alone with him was probably not the plan, so he better reveal everything he knows. Deus breaks out in sweat and asks in horror if the strongest in the universe is really going to use force, begging him to stop because one strike would be fatal. Takumi stared at him and suddenly realized the incredible. This guy is exactly the same breed as him. And seeing an ant on the ground, Takumi finally understood. The doctor is also from the very weakest side of humanity. Learning that he can win this fight, Takumi feels a surge of confidence and loudly shouts that he is going at him. Deus lets out a pitiful squeak and, overwhelmed with horror, covers his head with his hands like this. Takumi rushed forward and unleashed a flurry of quick strikes. More precisely, he started wildly waving his hands in front of that guy, like a baby. Deus writhes and repeats, "Ow," but suddenly freezes in the middle of the scream and asks why it actually doesn't hurt that much. Takumi's weak blows gave Deus a completely wrong conclusion. He adds a new note to his file. Supposedly, Takumi restrains his physical abilities to the last limit, just not to kill a weak opponent. Deus nervously sweats inside his barrier, thinking that he will have to correct his previous notes about Takumi not being able to hold back, because this level of control is clearly on another level, so. He decides to respond with the same energy. Deus shouts that if Takumi keeps this spirit, he will give this fight everything he has. They start to sort things out, but essentially only lightly slap each other's hands. Takumi tells the doctor that he is giving a worthy fight and has no intention of losing, and Deus waves his hands in response, shouting that he is not going to lose either. But while these two are having their pathetic slap fight, the real heavyweights make their move. Karno unleashes a large dark dragon flame at the same moment. The machine fires its omnidirectional execution cannon, and the difference in power is simply ridiculous because the clash creates a powerful explosion that instantly throws Takumi and Deus aside like dolls, completely interrupting their pathetic duel. Falling to the ground, Deus gets up, gasping he is completely exhausted, and tells Takumi that he can no longer physically endure, so he suggests settling the score with rock, paper, scissors. Takumi bent over, gasping for air, and immediately agreed that the doctor had a great idea. So they faced off one last time, shouting the starting call in unison and sharply lowering their hands. Now it would become clear who would finally win. Finally, the rock, paper, scissors match ended. Deus collapsed to the ground, admitting defeat, while Takumi raised his fist in the air and joyfully celebrated victory. When the fight ended peacefully, they switched to food and served a plate of perfectly fried rice balls. Deus took a bite and simply exploded with surprise. He asked, "What is this?" Amazed that rice, molded into a triangle and fried, becomes so crispy and tasty. Takumi did not stop. He lifted the pot and told the doctor that if you put the rice in a bowl and pour broth over it, the taste changes completely. It was as if Deus's brain just exploded. He shouted that it was a great idea, and he had never seen such advanced cuisine in his life. While the doctor was distracted by the food, Takumi squeezed his hand and asked, "Please, stop investigating me, we have already agreed," and Deus agreed to retreat. He was sorry to give up, but he understood that with his current strength, he could not measure Takumi's power. As the enemies withdrew, Karna smiled and waved to the cyborg and told Machina that she could return for a rematch at any time. Machina freezes and looks back, warning, "Next time I will challenge you in my true form." So she disappears with the doctor, and Karna nudges Takumi in the shoulder to get his attention now that it's quiet around. Karna suddenly becomes embarrassed. She tells Takumi that she can actually stay in human form only for a little longer. So Takumi stands by the cave, puzzled, and asks, wasn't the seal already completely broken when she left earlier? But she herself admits that this is not the case. In fact, right now she's trying incredibly hard just to manifest in this form. She explains if she relaxes even a little she will become like before again, so she constantly slept during the tournament, saving energy, and Takumi finally understands why she didn't react earlier. Takumi stands and listens as Karna teases him, asking if he missed her very much all this time. He asks if accumulating enough power will eventually break the seal once and for all, and Karna admits that she once thought so but was wrong. She becomes serious and explains that her desire to help him only opened a small hole in the seal, but to completely break it, something specific is needed. Suddenly she grabs Takumi by the shirt and shouts in his face that it is definitely the power of love. She closes her eyes and puckers her lips for a kiss, saying that if she and the wonderful prince mutually fall in love and kiss, the seal will definitely break. So Takumi just laughs happily and tells her that he sincerely hopes she will find such a partner someday, while friendzoning her right in front of her. Karna begins to fade, admitting that full recovery will take a very long time, so she asks Takumi to send Chloe her regards. Takumi watches her disappear and sincerely smiles at her, thanking her for saving his life back then. And for once he decides to be honest. He confesses that he actually felt a bit lonely when they couldn't talk to each other. A voice from the sword spoke Karna's words, saying that nothing can be done, she will have to wait for him, and the scene changes. Meanwhile, Dr. Deus sits at the computer and mutters that he doesn't care who wins the tournament, his only goal was to get the combat data. Machina thinks about her situation. Maintaining a mechanical body is very expensive, so she decided to take on high-paying jobs whenever she could. She clenches a data chip in her hand and admits to herself that she will do this job, no matter how dirty it is. Deus, fixated on his screen, discovers, among all the tournament participants, only 2 data files are truly important. He pulls out files on Takumi and Alice. Alice looks like a warrior, and Takumi seems like he's about to pee. Dewu's notes say that compared to all other fighters, the market price for data on these 2 mysterious eccentrics is simply off the charts. Deus says he is already recording the final battle of this grand tournament, will be his last chance to collect detailed data. The scene abruptly shifts to the arena, where Miek shouts that she is rushing into the fight, and at the end adds a loud meow. And Deus pulls out her dossier, revealing that she is a cat-type demon and the king of beasts mix, and is already ready to calculate. He carefully reviews Miyake's combat power rating, relying specifically on her recent battles with Zaha and Dagon. The results are impressive. Her strength and speed are immediately rated as the highest S level. Scrolling further, her endurance is at a magic at B, but her special ability has a double S, leading to. And here is the finale. Deus finally announces her final rating, rank S. But attention shifts to Alice. She barely exerts effort, simply pushing the monster away with the back of her hand, as if it is nothing at all. The creature rushes across the arena and crashes straight into a stone wall, scattering the masonry from the impact, and L. Linden looks on in complete shock and asks if she is really that strong, and the data relentlessly confirms. Alice's combat power grows infinitely. Deus looks at the battlefield data and sees that Alice's strength is stunning. Other demons panic. But what truly shocks him is not this, but that a man stands right on the stage completely calm, as if nothing happened. Takumi reaches out and gently strokes Alice's head, treating the legendary sword, Saint, like a child, and Deus sees the indicator sharply soar. He notices that she instantly took down 4 heavenly kings, but now her heart is wildly pounding. Alice blushes and trembles, but Dios reads the data completely wrong. He thinks she is terrified because he is convinced she cannot defeat Takumi. Machina also begins to panic. She understands that it is impossible, and if she scans him deeper, she will be killed. She raises her eyes to Takumi, but out of fear, he seems to her like a shadowy monster looking straight through her. A creepy voice in her head amplifies her fears and whispers that she has understood everything down to the smallest detail and is completely right. Her system instantly broke down, audio recordings are damaged, she thinks she is hallucinating, and the data only flickers, unknown. She decides that today she is not ready to die yet, so she resolutely turns and runs for her life while her sensors fail one by one. As Machina flees, her internal systems whirl, and she obsessively thinks of only one thing: cutting out the grotesque human parts still left in her body, and erasing all these tangled emotions, because her only desire is to become a completely perfect machine, without anything human that could hold her back. Takumi watches her go, having no idea what she is thinking, just standing and worrying whether she will be okay running here in such a dangerous war zone. Suddenly, Chloe approaches him closely, looks seriously, and asks if it is true that the seal of her sister Karna has been broken. Takumi explains that she is now again inside the sword, but yes, she was briefly revived earlier, and he asks why she mentions it. Chloe breathes a little and says that her grandfather, the ancient dragon himself, told her that the seal is beginning to weaken. She sighs, it's a pity she didn't manage to see her sister, and sends greetings from Grandpa to Kuchin, to which Takumi only politely nods. Then Takumi casually drops a bombshell. Grandpa remembered that the only way to remove the seal is not by force, but by love. Chloe instantly blushed and, completely confused, began to stammer and talk about love, while Celia stands behind and watches them. Like Celia suddenly grabs Takumi with a huge smile, laughing at how nice it sounds, and says she always dreamed that some guy would kidnap her after she retires. Celia got completely lost in her imagination, shouting that she wants him to kidnap her while he is exterminating the entire dragon clan, and she even blushed and, a little embarrassed, said that a true gentleman wouldn't even go to the royal palace because he will understand that true happiness is right here, to live forever with his beloved apprentice and never go anywhere else. And Chloe won't stand for this. She shouts that Celia's idea is completely without drama and insists that true fate is to stay together while the world tries to separate you. Even Karna picks up from her sword and agrees with Chloe. Forbidden love is definitely a classic, so she teases Takumi, joking that he is still just as popular among girls. Then she smiles and says she loves the trope where the girl is taken captive by villains, and during the rescue she falls in love, and asks Takumi what his type is. Takumi looks completely exhausted and admits that with all these romantic things he is totally clueless, but later he says that he prefers it when two people live their whole lives and never realize that they once liked each other, and Karna explodes, shouting that love doesn't start like that at all. Takumi simply walks away while the girls fight behind him, thinking about how just recently he was barely surviving and had no time to think about love. Karna says that sounds like him, but asks, what will you do if you realize your feelings at the last moment of life? Takumi blushes a little and says he won't know until that moment comes. But he raises his eyes to the sky with a smirk and admits that he will probably just pretend he didn't notice it at all. Not at all, Karna immediately yells at him, stop it, trying to pass it off as a cool story, although in reality it is not normal at all. Takumi got back to work and said that if they don't find the spy who is watching them, he won't know when he can stop this fake marriage show. Celia sees her chance and slyly asks if they should really get married, which makes Chloe and Leia in the background panic. Celia laughs, says she's joking, but then adds, she has a plan. She is called a search specialist. She will find anyone no matter how well they hide. When someone approaches, she explains, although he is not from the kingdom of Lucia, he is the one she trusts unconditionally. They start to have the thought, what if it's Sasha? But it is Rick who steps forward, waves his hand, and says to both, long time no see. Celia is literally glowing with a huge smile when she sees who it is, and this is the great thief Batsu, the guy who joined her in Nuru Hatchi's squad 10 years ago instead of participating. Although he swears nonstop when things get tough, he never gives up, so you can rely on him without hesitation. Celia tells him she is very glad he made it here, and Batsu just waved off all formalities and teased her, saying, you look a bit more grown-up and sexier now. With loud laughter, he directly asks if she and Takumi have already slept together. So Celia and Takumi immediately shouted at the top of their lungs that they definitely haven't done anything like that. Batsu sharply gets down to business. He says he has grasped the essence of the situation and asks where they want to start. Celia says they first need to find the spy who is watching them, but Batsu mockingly replies that he already noticed 3 on the way and has already stuffed one into the bag hanging on his shoulder. Takumi and Karna just stand there, jaws dropped. They are in complete shock. The captured spy is a girl with short dark hair. She is there on her knees and completely tied up. She is still stubborn, shouting that she won't say a word even if they kill her, and Batsu calmly says he only needs the employer's name. Takumi stares at her outfit and suddenly realizes she is dressed exactly like Yoro, that ninja from the 10 Giants. So Batsu sharply intervened and said that the details do not matter, he already knows who is really behind everything. Takumi asks in shock who it is, but Batsu ignores the question, simply saying that they will catch up with the rest of the squad now. He points into the distance and exclaims that 2 others are coming from there. It seems they have finally appeared. Suddenly voices shouted, "Sister Kuru, Sister Yoro," and loud, stomping footsteps quickly ran up to them. 2 figures exploded onto the stage at a crazy speed, and one of them was clearly a high-ranking adventurer Yoro. Batsu does not even flinch, instantly grabs the ropes and seizes both attackers midair before they manage to strike. With one instant capture move, he strikes them and leaves them hanging on the tree. They scream that it is impossible. Batsu brazenly smiles at the prisoners, boasting how fast it was. "I told them so." The ninja does not believe, muttering that no ordinary mortal can so easily catch their hidden movements. Batsu waved off. He says that he actually neither saw nor felt them, he just uses a different method of capture. So he says everything is about the ability to adapt, change your point of view, and suddenly, you notice what usually remains invisible. Captured ninja suddenly realizes something and asks if that's exactly how Batsu found out who that person really is. Batsu confirms he was going to tell Takumi everything as soon as they were caught. A big revelation was about to happen, but suddenly a voice interrupts and says that's the problem. Batsu just smiles at the threat and says, "Sorry, but that's impossible, I've already promised my friends." Suddenly the captured Yoro slips out of the ropes. She undresses completely and flies away, and her sister Asaz shouts how shameless she is, but Yoro just tells her to shut up. Leia instantly panics, covers Takumi's eyes with her palms, and says that he absolutely cannot look at a naked woman. Batsu watches as Yoro flies away and she shouted down, since she escaped, the fact that she was caught no longer counts. Yoro hangs there, completely naked, and asks him to wait before he reveals her secret. And Batsu apologizes for making her show her seductive figure, but says that she will soon be caught again anyway. She lets his mockery go in one ear and quietly asks, "Can you promise to keep silent until she really gets caught?" And he just sits and grins. It's clear he finds the whole situation very amusing. Batsu says interesting and agrees to keep his mouth shut until she is caught again. Yoro says she is grateful for the deal and, still completely naked, swiftly flies into the sky. Later in Leia's room in hysterics, why is Asad even here, and why is she eating Takumi's food as if it's nothing at all? Asad simply calls her a traitor and asks if she shouldn't be there now to beat up her sister. She says she was released only on the condition that she wouldn't run away or cause a scene. Karna sits right next to her and tells the sad one to just shut up and eat her food already. Asa stuffs his mouth with food and tells him that today he'll let him go because it's so delicious. All right, and Takumi turns back to the boy with the bandage on his head and asks what's wrong with Batsu. So Leia stands up and explains that Rick rushed after the spy. She notices that Batsu hasn't changed at all. She sternly warns them, "You are too careless. Yoro has the 7th rank in the guild, so she's not so easy to catch." Takumi interrupts. Batsu is a criminal and won't be accepted into the guild, but if he were, he would have the highest rank. And he is mentally confident. He knows exactly what Batsu is capable of. This guy flies through any difficulties as if it's nothing at all. Batsu just scratched his head, smiled slyly, and apologized, admitting that he actually let her slip away. Takumi becomes serious and asks Batsu who is behind all this. Batsu laughed loudly and said that the guy would definitely come to her aid, so they would just grab the boss. Suddenly a voice came from the road. Someone shouted that they hadn't eaten takumeshi for a long time. Takumi suddenly shouted as if something had just come to his mind. He asks himself if he really just picked up another freeloader, and Batsu introduced himself to the new girl. He is an old friend of Takumi and confirms that she is Leia, a student of both Alice and Takumi. Leia politely smiles and introduces herself. She says that she left Master Alice and is now studying under Takumi. So Batsu tells her that becoming Takumi's student was the right choice. He notices that she somewhat resembles Alice, so she will definitely learn a lot from him. Leia sincerely rejoiced upon hearing this and thanked Master Batsu warmly with a broad smile. Takumi stands aside and observes. If at first Leia barely fit in with the company of Chloe and Sasha, with Batsu she immediately found common ground. He smiles to himself, thinking that the ability to simply get along with people is probably another of Batsu's talents. Batsu finishes eating and stands up. He decides that now, being full, it's finally time to find that very goal, but meanwhile, near the prisoners, little Asa asks Sister Hiro if they are not being underestimated at all now, and Hiro says not to worry, their older sister Yoru does not lose to such guys. High in the mountains, Riku stands alone and admits, the enemy is truly impressive as he was told, he has completely lost her trail. Rick tensely looks around the mountains and wonders if his subject has returned home, and then he realizes she would never leave, she needs those points, so she must be hiding somewhere very close. He looks around confused. No matter how much he concentrates, only wild animals are felt around. Returning to the base, Kuro explains what is happening. This is a special technique transformation into a beast, right? She admits she and Yoru were thrown into a wolf pack in childhood to learn to live just like beasts. She adds that because of that training, if you only look for human presence, you will never be able to distinguish Yoru from an ordinary animal. Takumi teared up hearing about their traumatic childhood and vows to prepare a huge feast for them tonight to somehow make up for it. Leia boldly steps forward and volunteers to go searching. Moreover, she knows the beast technique, so she asks Batsu and Sasha to stay on guard while she goes alone. Batsu watches her leave and thinks to himself, what an honest and straightforward girl she is. But he immediately turns back to Takumi with a sly smile and asks if he has already made a move on her. Leia completely loses control and shouts that she did nothing, clearly defending herself because of the joke, but Batsu simply ignores her and says he will set traps near the entrance. He asks Sasha to watch the prisoners, so Takumi and Sasha turn around and in panic realize the two girls are already gone. Someone shouted loudly, asking if Yoru had returned to save them. But Rick looks at the empty room and says, no way, even with stealth, no one hides their presence that well. He suddenly realizes not only three sisters were behind this operation. Rick explains that from the very beginning there had to be four of them, although he only knew about one. He becomes serious and says that the real mastermind is the one who came to deal with this. Rick adds that this is not just hiding presence, this guy actually erases all his existence, and the group stands outside in confusion, unable to understand how someone could pull this off, especially carrying Satan Hiro. Rick blurted out the name of the item, the legendary Helm of Hades, which can erase its wearer and everyone they touch from reality. Leia repeats this name in shock, clearly understanding how bad it sounds, and Rick explains that although it is magical equipment, like Takumi's sword, this helm belongs to a mythical rarity, one that should not exist at all. From this, Takumi starts sweating. He asks if the organizer really has devices that are supposedly impossible to find. Leia turns back to their tracker and asks Batsu, how are they supposed to find someone who is completely invisible? So Batsu admits that it is impossible for them, but adds that they still have one card left. Takumi immediately points to himself in panic and asks if he has some hidden power he doesn't know about, but Batsu points to the bell on Takumi's collar and insists, no, that is exactly what you need to call him, even though he hates that guy. But just as they were about to try, a voice sharply interrupted. Too bad Dr. Deus has already set up a barrier that blocks teleportation. And the voice adds that the barrier will dissolve in a few days, and for now that bell is completely useless. Celia explains that she is not worried at all about leaving her post because she has fully entrusted the safety of the kingdom to Lucia Nuru Hatchi. She says there was no other way. If Nuru Hatchi had not been there to protect it, the organizer of the conspiracy would have already taken over the country. But suddenly someone approaches them and interrupts, smiling and saying that it seems that bell for calling was not needed after all. Nanasin instantly recognizes Nuru Hatchi standing there and bursts out screaming, asking what the hell happened to the kingdom she was supposed to watch over. Nuru Hatchi indifferently replies that she dumped all the responsibility on Nanasin, even though he cried about it, and it's ridiculous, because he is standing right here. She immediately started yelling at them. What else was I supposed to do when the one who planned everything still hasn't been caught and the kingdom is in danger? So she tries to explain that she tried to teleport to Takumi, but something completely blocked her magic, and she shouted that any enemy who managed to hold her back must be terribly dangerous, so of course she had to rush there to help. Takumi awkwardly laughs and says, great, all that's left is for Rick and Alice to come and the whole gang to gather together. But Rick is literally standing right next to him, all sweaty, and wonders, is Takumi blind or just pretending and acting like he doesn't notice for some deeper reason? Batsu points to the dark cave entrance in the rock, but Takumi just looks confused and asks what exactly he is talking about. The thief notices that Takumi and Sasha probably completely erased this place from their memory in vain, because it's actually quite nice here. He decides that it doesn't matter, he will fix everything when they capture the targets, so he casually contacts Nuru Hatchi. Nuru Hatchi stared at him, it really was Batsu. He was still wearing the same sinister grimace, and she tells him to learn from Takumi how to be nice. Batsu ignores the insult and smiles, asking if she confessed at the tournament and, more importantly, if she really did it with Takumi. Nuru Hatchi and Leia instantly lose their heads and shout at the top of their lungs that they did absolutely nothing. But Batsu doesn't stop. He mutters that Takumi is a weakling because he didn't approach all the girls gathered here, and adds that if it were him, he would take them all. Suddenly, a terrible voice sounded near his ear. "Long time no see, Batsu. It seems your final farewell is happening right now." He immediately falls to his knees and bows his head, desperately apologizing for getting carried away and pleading for her forgiveness. He quickly gets up, changes the subject, and asks what is really happening here because it seems they are not actually being attacked. Batsu immediately corrects him. It's the opposite. The enemy they caught escaped because he was wearing the Ada helmet. Nuru Hatchi froze. After asking what he just said, she thought that man was the only one who had the Ada helmet. She turns away and raises her hand, realizing aloud, if the helmet is here, it means exactly what she thinks. Takumi stands behind and watches her reaction closely, wondering to himself, does Nuru Hatchi also know the owner of this mysterious helmet? Nuru Hatchi wasted no time and instantly sprang into action, shouting that she was casting a spell that scans everything around, but it only lasts 5 minutes. Batsu steps back and tells her that the time is more than enough, she just needs to do it. And the gigantic spell, Wavesphere, Search, explodes, spreading magical waves throughout the area to find its target. Batsu instantly smiled. He hit the mark. He looked at a pair of armored legs standing in the shadows and said that now he sees they had been hiding there all along. Takumi and Leia squinted into the distance to see what he had found, and both were suddenly shocked. It can't be, was spinning in their heads. Leia looks at the armored figure before them and finally understands who it is. Shocked, she calls out, "Rick." Her thoughts race. Rick must have planned something big with Takumi and Alice Wei, even before the great tournament, just as Sasha had warned her. Takumi also begins to piece together the puzzle in his mind, recalling their first meeting when they were adventurers. Usually calm Rick became completely different, strange, and noticeably confused, just by seeing him. He stares at the armored back of his friend, and asks if this has been going on from the very beginning, so he explodes, yells at Rick, and demands to know if he deceived the entire company from day one. Rick doesn't even hide it. He directly tells Takumi that he figured it all out and confirms, "You are absolutely right." Suddenly, everything becomes strange. Takumi feels as if he is literally sucked into a series of memories. And he falls screaming through the dark abyss of memories straight into the past. He finds himself in a memory where a woman tells Rick to introduce himself to the group. So Rick sits at the table and introduces himself, confidently saying that he is the captain of the Knights of the Kingdom of Lucia. In the memory, young Takumi calls himself a novice who one day wants to become great, and Sasha smiles and offers to take care of all the healing. Next, Batsu bursts in. He says he is here only for the money, but if necessary, he will save them. And in reality, Chloe is struck by the scenes, calls Takumi, and asks if this is really a flashback, because the image is incredibly clear. She admits that she feels a much stronger connection with him than before. Takumi looks a bit confused and simply asks if that is really so. So he starts grumbling about how everything is arranged. He knows they are investigating Rick's betrayal, but watching his humiliating past in HD is pure shame. He realizes that this is one of those classic tropes, a long flashback that in reality takes no time at all, and agrees, that's exactly how it is. Chloe looks up at the screen and asks if she can comment a little while they watch. Rick below gives the go-ahead and tells her to go ahead. The head and flashback officially restart, and now an unprecedented live commentary track from the viewers is added to them. In the memory, the leader of the mages decided, since the team is full, it's time to immediately go challenge the S-rank quest. But young Takumi immediately panics and nervously asks if it wouldn't be too reckless for them to start with an S-rank. In the memory, Takumi is still panicking. He says their last raid at the AA air rank was a complete disaster, so he seriously doubts they will survive the legendary S-class quest. Necrocatch is completely calm, tells him not to worry. She insists that all three are actually quite talented, so there is no reason to fear the S-rank, but the task paper rustles and falls on the table. It turns out their goal is to conquer Emperor Behemoth, and this is a huge deal. Batsu just glanced at the request and immediately waved it off, saying that it is simply impossible. Sasha agrees that it is completely reckless, and Takumi just shouts how worried he is, but that's not the whole story because in reality, Chloe turns to Takumi and asks why Nuru Hatchi kept taking on such crazy, foolish quests. Takumi admits that he didn't understand then, but now everything is clear to him. She was accumulating magical power to open the door to the great labyrinth of the Demon King. The memory instantly transports us to the very place of the mission. It is a harsh, rocky wasteland. Steam bursts from the ground everywhere, and everything immediately went awry. Batsu shouts that Takumi is literally burning, orders Sasha to pour water on him right now and use healing magic. Nuru Hatchi takes control of the chaos and shouts at Riku to forget about her defense and throw all his strength into covering Takumi. Nuru Hatchi shouts that the difference in levels is just insane. She says that Takumi will just stand by that thing and turn into Esha, and Takumi replies that he knows this all too well. He admits that he was so traumatized that for some time he couldn't even cook over a fire. Suddenly, the Imperial Giant moved from its place. The ground shook from powerful jolts, while Nuru Hatchi tried to retreat farther from the monster. She prepares to unleash her final deadly move to turn the tide of the battle, but the dragon breathes out a giant breath first, and the surroundings are instantly covered by its unstoppable power. Nuru Hatchi instantly feels hopelessness, shouts that this is impossible, and yells at Takumi, "Run, save your life right now." She desperately calls Rick, relying on him to take defense and protect Takumi so. Rick steps forward and activates his heavy defensive technique, the Shield of 1,000 Layers, to repel the explosion. The attack still breaks through the shields, and Nuru Hatchi shouts that it's over this time. Takumi is definitely dead. Returning to the present, Takumi tells Chloe that he actually doesn't remember what happened next, but believes he survived since he is standing here. Rick realized that in this situation, he had no choice left at all, so he stands still and meets the huge dragon breath head-on with his shield. Nuru Hatchi stammered in shock when he realized that Rick actually wears the legendary invincible armor, Aegis. Chloe begins listing his other equipment, that Thor's gauntlet, and all that, and suspiciously asks if his entire set really consists of magical artifacts. She explains that usually it's impossible to equip even one, so she can't believe Rick is using 3 at once. Nuru Hatchi notices that he also has Hades' helmet, which erases presence. She had believed until now that it was just a myth. But she decides it doesn't matter how he got them when the armor melts off his body. She tells him that he is right, sincerely thanks him for protecting Takumi from that attack, and at that very moment. Then Rick was completely exhausted and fell to the ground, looking like a burnt piece of toast. Sasha wakes up, rubs his aching head, looks around confusedly, and asks what happened to Rick. Nuru Hatchi whispers to himself that saving his friend is the only thing that really matters, and Rick in the corner just grumbles in agreement. The smoke cleared, everyone panics, shouting, "Where did that huge ball of fire go, and did Rick really manage to stop it?" But when the dust settles, only a round white lump remains on the ground, sitting and squeaking. It looks at them with an empty gaze, tilting its head, and sounds completely puzzled by the situation, so Takumi and Sasha instantly rush to hug it, shouting how insanely cute and fluffy it is. Rick watches them from the ground and can't help but notice that for some reason the creature is terribly attached to Takumi and simply ignores everyone else. Nuru Hatchi explains that this beast is actually the reincarnation of Kaiser Behemoth, so it's clear that he fiercely hates her and those who tried to kill him. Mashina adds, during the fight, Takumi was the only one who showed no hostility. He can be trusted. Takumi looks closely at this little one and decides, since they are now friends, he will give him a real name. He suggests naming him Behibu because it sounds cute, but someone says to keep him as food in case of trouble, and the poor creature just panics. Rick suggests calling that thing cotton meat because it is so fluffy, and someone agrees that everyone is really only thinking about eating it. Takumi waved off jokes about food and decided, since it's just a baby, he will name it Makyun. Nuru Hatchi looks at them with a smirk, noticing that the creature has really only attached itself to Takumi. But Takumi immediately cut her off rudely. "You are wrong, stop calling them emergency food or caught meat." Then Chloe lightly touched his shoulder, pointed out that the baby had disappeared, and indifferently asked if he really went and ate it after all. Takumi panics completely and shouts that he did not eat it. The baby is still alive and full of strength. Nuru Hatchi says that once all this mess is settled, she might visit someone she hasn't seen for a long time, and she constantly drags the group on S-rank quests, and Takumi says, as long as she is having fun, he almost dies every time. When the quests are finally completed, Takumi ends up as the camp cook for the team, but Sasha offers to help him. He smiles and tells her that it's okay. She needs to rest. She is completely exhausted from constantly treating his wounds. Takumi started cooking food in the camp and told everyone that since he was useless in battle, at least, he can take on the cooking duties. Chloe watches him work, notices that he seems to really enjoy it, and asks why he gave up the adventurer's life if he likes this lifestyle so. So this awakens a memory from the past, in the grand labyrinth of the great demon king, where his former squad was conducting an investigation in the castle ruins, exactly at the place where Alice was first abandoned. Finally, they approached the door of the demon king's room, on which hung a vile magical seal that measured the strength of the one who opens it and reflected it back to stop them. But Takumi simply approached and flung open those huge doors as if they were made of cardboard, and this completely shocked everyone. He explains the trap did not affect him because of one simple thing: his power level was literally zero, and the doors simply could not repel anything. When the doors opened, a single beam of light cut through the darkness of the huge hall and fell right in the middle. Tiny young Alice was sitting all alone on the cold floor. Now looking around, he wonders, why was the strange boy just sitting in such a dangerous place? Takumi continues. The story says he rushed to save the girl, calling it an extremely touching scene. He explains that at that time Alice still could not speak words, only made strange moans, but Chloe does not let him finish, instantly interrupts and corrects. It was not nonsense, it was the demon language. Takumi was completely confused by this information, and his voice barely obeying, asks her what Alice was really saying then. So she reveals the truth. Alice was actually looking at him and asking if he could be broken and destroyed. Today Takumi completely loses control. He starts shouting at his past self to run for his life. But Chloe, as if teaching him to breathe, tells him to calm down. He is not dead. In the memory, he approaches the girl. She immediately swings at him. He cries out in pain when she hits, but it does not stop him. He just laughs, says that children need to misbehave a little, and picks her up right there as if it is nothing at all. He puts on his best heroic face and says that she was probably lonely. From now on he will protect her. Rick stands in the shadows and watches them walk away, admitting that he does not quite understand what happened, but is just glad they are safe, and mutters to himself that strange things really do happen in this world. And he just stands there silently, quietly smiling from under his helmet. Takumi notices that he is standing alone in the corridor and asks Karn, what exactly is Rick looking at? But Rick is not at all about that. He recognizes in Takumi the demon king in an astral spiritual body. Suddenly it dawns on him and he panics, realizing that this is the same demon king who earlier possessed Linden during the great tournament. He started digging too much into thoughts, wondering if the possession is happening now or if it is just a remnant. But he decides to postpone it for now, quietly saying that he will see them another time. Takumi says that after picking up Alice, his adventure turned into a run through the Demon King's castle. A slimy ball attached itself to his chest, and Alice was on his back. In the city, Chloe burst out laughing and said that he was like a nervous mom raising children, but Takumi ignored her and asked the butcher for pork scraps. Chloe keeps teasing him, mockingly saying that domestic life suits him much better than fighting with a sword. Takumi returns in thought to those old days and admits that living with Alice meant risking his own life every day. He explains painfully that her power was too strong to handle. She would destroy everything around, even those standing too close. Once, just as they decided to rest a bit, their camp was suddenly attacked by a giant boar monster. So Alice rushed to tame it, and with one blow simply smashed the huge beast to dust. But the problem was that the fragments scattered everywhere, and Takumi almost died from the blows of the scattered pieces. Late at night, while they are cooking by the fire, Takumi calls Alice. She turns and asks what he wants. He points to the cauldron full of meat and asks her if she really thinks she can eat the whole monster she just knocked down, but Alice instantly exclaimed that no way, she would just burst if she tried to eat all of that. Takumi quietly, with reproach in his voice, told her that if she couldn't eat him, then there was no need to kill. It would have been enough just to scare and chase away. He becomes serious and teaches her the most important rule: if you take someone's life, you must take responsibility for it. Alice froze for a moment with her gaze, then nodded, indicating that she understood what kind of responsibility he was talking about. Immediately after that, Takumi folds his hands and loudly prays to the gods and spirits, thanking them for the day. And Alice asks him what he is doing. Takumi explains that he puts his gratitude for the food into the words. So he tells her that she doesn't need to say it out loud at all. It's enough just to think these words in her heart. Alice tries, but Takumi admits that he never thought this advice would later cause such a huge misunderstanding. Later, Alice is delighted. He caught a little rabbit without crushing it, and she exclaims how great he is for such gentleness. Takumi gasps, knowing the bitter truth: he is simply too weak to kill it with one blow, even if he tried very hard. Alice completely misread everything. She excitedly says that he is amazing, hiding his power and restraining himself so perfectly, even though he is stronger than her. This really teaches her restraint, and Takumi begins to hope that she will be able to control her strength and live normally. And he watches as she walks ahead, admitting that at that time, he really thought everything would be that simple. Takumi is going home with the rabbit, completely not understanding the situation and confidently thinking that he outsmarted her. After that, with Alice in the pen, they start completing S-class tasks one after another. And 6 months have passed. Takumi looks like a walking corpse from all that stress. Meanwhile, someone sharply pulls the cork out of the test tube to take a sample from the field. Nuru Hatchi asks Takumi if he noticed that she kept a piece of the monster that Rick defeated in the test tube. Wasting no time, the group heads to the guild headquarters to check if there is any work. Link tells them that there are no S-class tasks, but instead offers AA1 in the Chaos Valley. Nuru Hatchi sees there is no choice, agrees, and asks who the target is. So Linden asks them to wait a second while she checks the file. But then she smiles and warns Takumi that Bahibu is literally eating his shirt right now. Takumi panics. Bahibu is literally eating the shirt right off his back. And he suddenly realizes that the receptionist is actually Linden. She explains that she was assigned here. She pulls out the needle and says shortly, "Undress," and Takumi, embarrassed, asks if they really have to do it here. But Nuru Hatchi intervenes and shouts that the receptionist shouldn't be doing such personal favors. Linden sews it anyway while Takumi blushes, so Nuru Hatchi demands that she stop because she wants to do it herself. Linden finishes the work and hands the shirt back. Takumi sincerely thanks her for such a quick patch. She instantly switches to business mode and sets the target in the Valley of Chaos. But Nuru Hatchi slyly asks if she has a crush on Takumi, and Linden just smiles and tells Takumi to call her if he loses another button. The group sets off, and Cara says that Takumi used to be very popular with women. Takumi waves it off, says he's just unreliable, so in the end, everyone acts like his guardians. Takumi looks at the vision and notices Rick right there. He is handing something to Linden, and at that moment, Takumi realizes that. In fact, Rick and Linden worked together as partners for over 10 years, hiding it from everyone. So he finally puts all the pieces of the puzzle together. If Linden was already the Demon King back then, he has no idea who Rick really is. Cara looks at him with eyes full of worry and asks Takukun if he wants to stop watching these flashbacks now. She looks him in the eyes and says directly, there are things in this world that he probably better not know about. She says no matter what Rick stirs up, they will just pretend they saw nothing. And then she smiles and asks if he just wants to leave everyone and go somewhere with her, just the two of them. She wants to escape all this drama and start a quiet life somewhere where no one will bother her. Takumi lowers his eyes and says that it is impossible. He adds that he already did exactly that 10 years ago. But he knows the past he ran away from cannot be returned, and now finally the time has come to pay for it. The memory shifts to a place called the Valley of Chaos, with huge rocky cliffs where Linden steps forward and loudly announces she appoints Rick as the official leader of their party. Takumi smiles and tells Rick that he counts on him, completely unaware that he is speaking to a traitor. And the guy in armor from their group moves forward into a narrow path, while the others stay behind. Suddenly, he activates the skill shell release, and his armor begins to crack from pulsating energy. Suddenly, out of nowhere, right in front of him, emerges a huge chimera with the head of a lion and the tail of a snake. Turning to the present, Cara looks at the vision and says that it is definitely ancient magic that created the chimera. Takumi begins to panic and says that he remembers this moment in detail. This is what attacked him. In the memory, the beast roared and lunged straight at him with extended claws. Rick shouts, asks what the hell this is, looking completely stunned, as if he did not plan this. In the memory, Alice panics. She says that the reconnaissance was wrong, and such a monster has no place here. So she screamed and, desperately rushing forward, tried to stop it. The chimera, strikes the ground hard with its paws, smashing the soil right in front of them. Someone shouted that the thing is still moving. It really withstood a direct hit from Alice as if nothing happened. And Takumi raises his eyes in horror at the very moment when the huge jaws of the beast loom over him. The chimera swings its claws with incredible force and mercilessly tears him apart. And him, like a doll, was thrown through the air, and Alice screamed his name in horror. Returning to the present, Takumi tells Cara that he is watching, that Memorabut admits that there was always one mystery. And he says that he still did not understand why that single strike of the chimera did not kill him instantly. Suddenly, a memory reveals the reason. When Alisa lets out a wild scream, a giant pillar of light explodes around her. The narrative tells that Alisa was completely covered by this colossal force, and she can no longer restrain her destructive impulses. The witch shouts to Takumi not to come closer, saying that Alisa is already lost and too dangerous. But Takumi completely ignores the warning and forces his battered body to rush straight into the energy explosion. The witch panics and shouts his name, and he is crouched, groaning in pain from previous wounds. But he raises his eyes at the very moment when Alyssa lets out a beastly roar and lunges at him with pure murderous intent, completely out of her mind. Face to face stand the strongest and the weakest creature, and no one backs down. And then Takumi at that very moment realizes, perhaps he was born only to stop Alyssa right now. Alyssa swung and struck, but instead of crushing him, her fist hit his chest with an extremely soft, harmless thud. The anger disappears instantly, she remains completely confused, and Takumi gently strokes her head. And she immediately begins to panic, asking why he is bleeding so badly and what happened to him. Takumi gently whispers to her that everything is fine now, and there is no need to worry anymore. Alice smiles broadly, completely back to herself, and admits that Takumi is incredible even when she is at full power. He is beyond her strength. She hugs him tightly and happily exclaims that he is truly the strongest guy in the entire universe. Takumi looks exhausted and beaten, but he just smiles back and tells her that she understood everything and she is really right. The same words echoed for a moment in the darkness, the same ones he just said, and then Rick confesses. This phrase was his signature 10 years ago, and Takumi freezes. It shocks him more than the fact that Rick turned out to be a villain. But Karna starts to panic, shouting that Takun is literally dying from his wounds and asks if he is okay. But Takumi grits his teeth and ignores the pain. He realizes that he always wondered how he managed to survive so long. Usually he would have died already. He understands. Rick had been using an invisible shield all this time that reduced the damage he received. At that moment, Takumi and Karna froze in shock and realized this whole plan must have started back then. Karna is completely confused, and Takumi reveals everything, using Alice's misunderstanding to make him the strongest. That was the plan from the very beginning. Rick stands amid the ruins and calmly says that Takumi did excellently. He is completely right about the scenario. Takumi froze, looking at him, completely stunned and speechless, stammering as he tries to comprehend the enemy's words. Rick declared that his ultimate goal is to make Takumi the king of the world, and then put an end to everything. The end, Takumi suddenly realizes. The vision he just saw was not accidental. Rick deliberately showed him that flashback. Rick admits that he did not plan for the demonic sword to follow them, but Karna sharply replies that she will stay with Taka under any circumstances. What? Takumi steps forward and asks the most important question: why all these tricks to make someone weak like him appear strong? Rick answers their king must know true pain. Essentially, it should be the weakest person in the world. He continues his speech, insisting that this frail person must somehow become stronger than all of them, and Rick grabbed his face under his fingers. A grim truth was revealed. His physical body had long since decayed, and this clearly hinted that now Takumi must take charge of everything. Takumi completely loses his mind. Upon seeing the rot, he screams at the top of his lungs that this is terrifying. He shouts that Rick is completely headless, empty inside, and absolutely frightened by the empty armor. Rick tries to interject to explain himself, stammering a little. But Takumi interrupts him and steps back, shouting for him to finally put on the helmet, because a talking stump instead of a neck is just too creepy. Rick was confused by the sharp exclamation and immediately agreed, feverishly trying to put the helmet back on. When he finally calmed down, Takumi told Rick that making him king would change nothing. He literally can't do anything and refuses to do anything. Rick simply agrees with him, admitting Takumi really is slacking off all the time. So he explains that being the king of misunderstandings is perfectly normal. Alice will take the title of the strongest. Rick spread his arms wide and declared that this result is the only thing he couldn't achieve in thousands of years. And he stands in full armor, now strangely with 2 braids, and says that this is the perfect world. Takumi just stands there, all sweaty and completely confused, and asks, what the hell does Rick mean by the perfect world? He realizes that Rick is really serious, calls him disgusting. Thinking about this for thousands of years is really scary. Takumi decisively told him that he will never become the king of something so humiliating. But Rick tells him that it doesn't matter what he wants. Misunderstandings already live their own lives and can't be stopped. He makes the scene even more dramatic and announces that Takumi will rule this world forever. But Takumi interrupts him, points his finger and looks so scared by something, so he says to Rick, shut up and watch yourself. Rick froze and made a confused sound. Takumi's face lit up and he exclaimed Bihibu, realizing that the little ball was very close. The creature makes a cute squeak in response, as if acknowledging Takumi, and simply. At that moment Alice appears, and Takumi immediately tries to tattle on Rick to her.